Chapter 348. Staying with these people, Gray would chat with them from time to time. From these people's words, Gray understood that these nobles weren't here for the treasures in the king's tomb. They were only here to pay their respects to the king's tomb. The other party pulled Gray along because they felt that the more people there were, the safer it would be. Of course, Gray's noble attire was also another reason. If Gray was wearing mercenary armor, they would never have invited Gray. Nobles always liked to be close to other nobles. The same was true for mercenaries. Not long after, a group of more than 10 people riding camel beasts, a domesticated animal suitable for long desert journeys, stepped into the Golden Desert and headed towards the tomb marked on the map. The Golden Desert was rumored to be a desert full of gold. Here, legends of getting rich overnight were everywhere. Every year, many mercenaries would be attracted to this place. However, when Gray entered the Golden Desert, he did not see large pieces of gold. Instead, he saw piles of bones. On some of the bones, there were obvious blade wounds. Obviously, they had been killed. It was unknown whether it was because of the uneven distribution of gold or because they had been attacked by desert bandits. There were also some who did not have obvious wounds. If there were no accidents, they should have died of thirst. Only the Marquis family had rune space bags. Ordinary people, and even ordinary families, did not have them. There were also some who had very strange wounds, as if they had been bitten by animals. They had encountered wild beasts or blood fiends. Although the Golden Desert was a vast desert terrain, it was not without animals and blood fiends. During the day, they hid under the endless yellow sand to avoid the scorching heat. At night, they crawled out of the yellow sand to look for food. Scenes of hunting and being hunted were played out. How strong do you think a king-level expert is? I heard that a single blow is enough to destroy a mountain. Do you think it's true? The thick-browed youth asked curiously. It shouldn't be possible. How strong would one have to be to destroy a mountain with a single blow? Some of the nobles did not believe it. But that's what many books say. A noble girl said, "Those books are just the imagination of some bards. They can't be taken seriously." Some of the nobles refuted. "Brother, what do you think?" The thick-browed young man asked Gray. Gray did not appear to be arrogant. If it's not too big and is only a few hundred meters tall, it shouldn't be a problem to destroy it with one blow. Are you sure? The nobles looked at Gray suspiciously. I was in Mercenary City during the battle between the King of Mercenaries and the King of Assassins. Gray explained. What? You were there when the King of Mercenaries and the King of Assassins were fighting? The nobles' faces were filled with envy. A year ago, the King of Assassins had attacked Mercenary City and fought with the King of Mercenaries in Mercenary City. Many people regretted that they had not been in Mercenary City at the time. They regretted that they had missed such a grand occasion that was hard to come by even in several decades. They had not expected Gray to be there. "Brother, hurry up and tell me." Several noble youths and young ladies clamored for Gray to tell them what he had seen at that time. Gray didn't refuse and told them in detail what he had seen. Immediately, the noble youths exclaimed again and again, fascinated by what they had seen. Chatting with the nobles as they hurried to the king's graveyard made the journey less boring. 2 days quickly passed, and they had already reached the depths of the Golden Desert. The sun shone brightly in the sky, sprinkling down its fiery radiance. It was like balls of fire that made their bodies feel hot, as if they were being roasted on a metal plate. These nobles had been spoiled since childhood and had never experienced such suffering. They immediately complained. But to Gray's surprise, none of the nobles suggested going back the way they had come. Even the 2 noble girls clenched their teeth and persevered. Putting aside their strength, Gray looked at them in a new light in terms of their perseverance. He could see that the education these nobles had received was not endless arrogance. Brother, why is it so cool here?" After a few days of interaction, the nobles realized that Gray was knowledgeable, so they liked to talk to Gray. The young man with thick eyebrows rode over on his workhorse and suddenly shouted, "I have an ice magic weapon in my hand." Gray smiled and explained. He naturally did not have an ice magic weapon, but after his strength reached the barbarian level, his control of the Blood Fiend's abilities had greatly improved. Not only could he separate ice and wind abilities, but he could also control them in fine detail. Therefore, he could directly control the ice abilities and let his body faintly emit a cold air to resist the scorching heat outside. Brother, why didn't you say so earlier that you had such a good thing? Yeah, brother, why didn't you say so earlier? The noble's young men and young women did not stand on ceremony with Gray. After a few days of interaction, they had become quite familiar with Gray. They all urged their workhorses to come near Gray to get some cool air. Gray did not refuse and let the cold air spread out slightly to help them resist the heat. With his current strength as a barbarian blood warrior, the consumption of this bit of blood energy was naturally nothing to him. The sun hung high in the sky outside. Gray and the rest felt comfortable all over. Waves of cool air enveloped them, helping them resist the heat. In the end, the guards that the nobles brought along, as well as the mercenaries that they hired as guides, also came over. Among them, Gray was keenly aware that among the nobles' guards, there was an old man in his 50s who was looking at him with a cautious gaze. He must have noticed that the source of the cold air was not ordinary. Gray did not mind. After all, he did not intend to hide his strength in front of these people. However, this old man aroused Gray's interest. He was dressed in gray battle armor and carried a long spear on his back. His body faintly emitted a murderous aura that came from a veteran of the battlefield. His strength should not be too weak. In the next few days, Gray and the rest traveled through the desert, where it was difficult to tell the direction. The terrain of the desert was indeed prone to change. Gray compared it with a map and found that many of the terrains had changed. At this time, the experienced mercenaries hired by the nobles came into play. They used the occasional desert plant to determine the direction and guide them in the correct direction. Another day passed, and they were not far from the tomb of the kings. At most, they would need 3 to 4 days of travel. At this time, they were already extremely deep into the golden desert. Whoosh! Suddenly, the sand beneath their feet splashed. 2 huge black pincers suddenly stretched out, revealing a pitch-black head that was covered in carapace. It clamped down on the camel horse that one of the noble ladies was riding. Its pincers were pitch black and looked extremely sharp. There was no doubt that this was a blood fiend. The expression of the noble lady on the camel horse changed. She urged the camel horse to dodge, but the appearance of the black blood fiend was too sudden. It seemed that she would not be able to dodge it. "Miss, be careful." Gray immediately prepared to act, but at this time, he noticed that the old man in battle armor quickly took out the spear at his waist and suddenly thrust it forward. Pooh! The spear thrown by the old man was extremely sharp. It easily pierced through the head of the black blood fiend, and a white substance immediately seeped out. With its head pierced, the 2 pincers of the black blood fiend powerlessly fell to the ground. The camel horse and the noble lady on it narrowly escaped the attack of the blood fiend. That was close. Fortunately, Grandpa Andrew acted in time. The noble lady was shocked. The other nobles were also shocked. They did not expect to be attacked by a blood fiend. Although they had heard of blood fiends in the Golden Desert, they rarely appeared during the day. They did not expect to encounter one here. It should be a berserker. Glancing at the black blood fiend, Gray deduced in his heart. This black blood fiend was not very strong. It should only be a murderous level blood fiend. However, the old man was able to kill it with a single blow. His strength was naturally much higher than this black blood fiend. Therefore, Gray estimated that this person should be a berserker. In the following 2 days, Gray and the rest were attacked by blood fiends. One time, they were attacked by 2 blood fiends at the same time. These were 2 rare blood fiends that lived together. Even with the strength of a berserker, the old man could not kill both of them at the same time. Gray also acted to prevent them from injuring anyone. This made this group of nobles finally realize the dangers of the Golden Desert. At the same time, they were shocked by Gray's strength. They did not expect that Gray could kill a murderous level blood fiend with a single blow like the old man. They could not help but rejoice that they had invited Gray into their group. Otherwise, they might have been injured or even killed. 2 days later, They finally arrived at the Tomb of the Kings. In the middle of a low-lying area surrounded by many sand peaks, there were many tents. These were the temporary residences of the various forces that had rushed here. The tents were in a circular shape, faintly surrounding the center of the low-lying area. In that direction, they could vaguely see a group of buildings on the ground. That should be the Tomb of the Kings. Why? Why can't we get closer? However, when Gray and the nobles wanted to get closer to the Tomb of the Kings to take a closer look, they were stopped by someone. More than 10 people wearing the same color of battle armor and exuding a strong, murderous aura blocked their way. The Tomb of the Kings is not yours. Why can't we get closer? A noble lady said angrily. Along the way, they had encountered danger several times just to take a look at the Tomb of the Kings. She did not expect that they would be rudely stopped by these people when they were already so close to the Tomb of the Kings. This made her very angry. Because of my Wallen family. A noble youth walked over with his hands behind his back, followed by several guards. His face was full of arrogance. Chapter 349. Based on my Wallen family. The young nobleman shot a disdainful glance at the nobleman who had spoken, his eyes filled with disdain. He was dressed in a white, high-class noble robe, his blonde hair slightly curled like the sun, and his unruly aura was unmistakable. This was Edgar, a direct descendant of the Wallen family, whose arm had been cut off by Gray. Wallen family? It's someone from the Wallen family. The expressions of the noblemen and women could not help but change slightly. The Wallen family was one of the 7 great marquis family in the Purple Moon Kingdom, and even among the 7 great marquis family, it could be ranked at the top. Among them, even the person with the highest status was only a berserker, and the noble young lady guarded by the old man was only a descendant of a Count of the Kingdom. The status and background of a Count of the Kingdom were much higher than that of a Count, but compared to the Marquis family, it was not just by a little bit. Moreover, the other party was a family that could be ranked at the top of the 7 great Marquis family. All of you scram. You want to try your luck at the king's graveyard like others? Dream on. Seeing that the name of the Wallen family had intimidated the other party, Edgar revealed a trace of pride on his face as he mocked. Can the Wallen family be so unreasonable? Some of the noblemen were truly indignant, but their confidence was clearly lacking. Edgar's gaze suddenly turned to this noble, his eyes flashing with coldness as he spoke. What? Do you have an opinion? Being stared at by the other party, the noble's face flushed red and sullen. But in the end, he lowered his head and did not dare to make a sound. The other party was from the Marquis family, and was not someone his family could provoke. Seeing that this noble had given in, Edgar laughed disdainfully and looked at the other nobleman as he spoke coldly and arrogantly. And the rest of you, who has an opinion? All the nobles who were under his gaze could not help but lower their heads in grievance. Even the noble girl from the Count's family was no exception. The Marquis family was not someone they could provoke. They clenched their fists so tightly that their nails dug into their flesh. They had never felt so aggrieved since they were young. However, the situation was beyond their control. The other party was indeed not someone they could afford to offend. I do. At this moment, a faint voice rang out from behind the nobles. Who? Get out here. Edgar's eyes suddenly turned cold. He had already revealed his identity as a member of the Wallen family, yet there were still people who dared to question him. It seemed that if he didn't teach them a lesson, he wouldn't be able to display the prestige of the Wallen family. With a wave of his hand, more than a dozen guards with murderous looks quickly surrounded the group of people. The nobles, guards, and mercenaries all paled. They didn't know what to do. Gray shook his head and unhurriedly walked out from behind the nobles. His black hair fluttered in the wind as he looked calmly at Edgar and chuckled. The Wallen family, what great prestige. It's you. Seeing Gray, Edgar's originally cold expression immediately changed. He took several steps back, his eyes spitting fire as he gnashed his teeth. Gray Fergus, seeing Gray, he couldn't help but think of his severed right hand. Although it had been reattached and had been restored at a great cost, the pain and humiliation of losing his hand made him hate Gray to the bone. Chasing people away in front of a king's tomb, young Master Edgar is truly awe-inspiring. I think even Her Highness the Second Princess isn't as awe-inspiring as you." Gray glanced indifferently at the dozen or so Wallen family guards and sneered. "Gray Fergus, don't be so arrogant." Edgar's eyes were filled with hatred, but there was also fear in the depths of his eyes. The other party had a powerful magical weapon that could control 4 barbarian-level blood fiends. He also had a powerful spatial item to carry the 4 blood fiends with him. He was just one person, but his battle strength was no less than 2 barbarian-level blood warriors who cultivated special blood techniques, and he might even be stronger. Although the Wallen family had also brought powerful magical weapons this time, they still weren't confident that they could defeat and kill the other party, unless they used rune puppets with the strength of wild blood warriors. Knowing that the king's tomb had appeared, the Wallen family had thought of bringing rune puppets. However, the desert terrain was filled with yellow sand. If too heavy an object walked on it, it would be easy for the ground to sink. There was no way to bring in rune puppets made of metal. "Arrogant, young Master Edgar, aren't you saying the wrong thing?" Gray had a mocking look on his face. From the beginning, the conflict had started because the other party wanted to drive them away and prevent them from approaching the king's tomb. Now, he was actually saying that Edgar was arrogant. He couldn't help but wonder if the head of this descendant of the Wallen family was normal. He actually can make the Wallen family afraid. Seeing that this descendant of the Wallen family had a faint trace of fear in his face and words after seeing Gray, a few of the nobles couldn't help but reveal a trace of surprise. Along the way, they had already felt that Gray was unusual. After all, he was able to kill a murderous-level blood fiend with a single blow and displayed great strength at such a young age. His identity was definitely not simple. However, they didn't expect Gray to be able to make the Wallen family afraid. Who exactly is he? They searched through their memories, but couldn't find a Fergus family that could make the Wallen family afraid. Although Gray's current strength wasn't weak, he had almost never appeared at important events in the Purple Moon Kingdom. The only time he had appeared was at a banquet held by the royal family of the Purple Moon Kingdom. But because the nobles present didn't want the news of their descendants' embarrassment to spread, they deliberately concealed it. Therefore, until now, very few families knew about Gray and the Fergus family behind Gray. Someone is having a conflict with the Wallen family. This open space, surrounded by sand dunes, was extremely flat, and one could almost see the end of it at a glance. Therefore, the moment the conflict appeared, it was already noticed. Many people walked out of their tents and looked over. When they saw that one of the parties was the Wallen family, their eyes couldn't help but be filled with resentment. The Wallen family had surrounded the king's tomb and didn't allow them to approach, which naturally made them extremely angry. However, the strength of the Wallen family forced them to swallow their anger. Of course, their hearts were still filled with rage. The king's tomb is an ownerless item. Why can't we approach it? I really want someone to teach the Wallen family a lesson. Someone from a small family said angrily. There's no need to think about it. Although the Wallen family is domineering, they know how to act appropriately. This group of people will definitely be chased away. Someone from a small family shook his head. That's right. The 2 Duke families, the Marquis family, and the powerful Count families have all directly let us through. Only small families like us aren't allowed to approach. Another person added, it's impossible for any faction to jump out and teach the Wallen family a lesson. Rather, the few factions that have the ability to teach the Wallen family a lesson would be happy to see the Wallen family do so. Suddenly, someone exclaimed in surprise. That's not right. Look, the Wallen family seems to be afraid of someone in that group. They looked over and saw Edgar hastily retreat upon seeing Gray, his face filled with anger and fear. Quite a few factions were just as surprised as them. They couldn't help but curiously look over, trying to guess at the identity of this group of people that could make the Wallen family so afraid. Even the major factions looked over with interest. They couldn't help but be surprised that someone could intimidate the Wallen family. Who's causing trouble? At this moment, an angry rebuke rang out. He saw a group of people rushing over in an aggressive manner. The people in the lead were 2 old men. One of them was skinny and the other had white hair. They were the two barbarian blood warriors from the Warren family that Gray had fought before. Seeing that their clansmen hadn't been able to drive away this group of people who wanted to approach the king's tomb and had instead attracted the attention of many people, the two knew that things weren't looking good and hurried over. They couldn't let these small nobles see hope and unite. Otherwise, even the Wallen family wouldn't be able to suppress them. After all, there were quite a few nobles who had come this time, and there were even some count families among them. As this group of people aggressively rushed over, some of the small factions who had carelessly blocked their path were pushed aside with a slap. They immediately staggered and almost fell to the ground. Their expressions changed again and again, but in the end, they could only endure, not daring to voice their anger. They didn't care about these people who had staggered, but didn't even dare to let out a fart as they rushed over. How bold! You actually dare to provoke the Wallen family. Before they even arrived, this group of people had already placed a huge label on Gray's group, directly determining that Gray's group was provoking the Wallen family. With this determination, it was only natural for them to act. Provoke? I am provoking them. What? Do you have a problem with that? Gray turned and looked at this group of people, his focus on the two old men at the front. Courting death. The two old men were immediately enraged. There was actually someone who dared to openly provoke the Warren family. However, when the two saw Gray's face, the shock and anger on their faces suddenly froze. Their expressions changed slightly, and it was only after a moment that they angrily said, "What?" After a while, they angrily said, "Gray Fergus, do you really want to make an enemy of the Wallen family? It's your Wallen family that wants to make an enemy of me." Gray coldly said, "Do you really think the king's tomb belongs to your family? You actually dare to stop people from approaching. Just one word, are you going to move or not?" Gray's body faintly emitted an icy chill. He did not plan to make a move against the Wallen family right now. The Wallen family's desolate-level rune puppet made him somewhat apprehensive. But if the Wallen family still wanted to stop him from approaching the king's tomb, he didn't mind teaching the Wallen family a lesson. Chapter 350. The atmosphere in the open space near the tomb of the king was extremely tense. Whether it was Gray or the two elders of the Wallen family, they all faintly emitted a chill. The sun was high up in the sky, but the people nearby couldn't help but feel a chill seeping into their bodies. All the major and minor factions looked over with different expressions. This was a confrontation between two major factions. One was the Marquis family, the Wallen family, and even within the Marquis family, they were ranked at the top. The other was a faction that most of them had only heard of today. However, from the fact that this faction could make the Wallen family feel apprehensive, it was clear that this faction was not small. The two elders of the Wallen family had gloomy expressions. If they retreated here, the Wallen family's prestige would be severely damaged, and they might not be able to suppress the other smaller families. However, if they tried to forcefully stop them, it would definitely be a tough battle. They were well aware of the other party's strength. They weren't very strong, and either of them could kill them. However, the weapons in their hands were extremely powerful. Although they had brought powerful magic weapons, if they fought with the other party before the treasures of the tomb of the king had even appeared, it would only benefit the other factions if they were injured. Let them pass. The skinny elder's expression was uncertain, but he finally relented. Edgar, who had blocked the path of Gray's group, didn't hesitate and hurriedly retreated with a group of guards. In truth, he had wanted to retreat long ago. He was well aware of Gray Fergus's battle prowess, and he couldn't stop him with his meager strength. Now that he had received the order, he naturally didn't hesitate. The Wallen family has retreated. They were actually able to force the Wallen family to retreat. Just what kind of faction is this Fergus family? The Fergus family isn't one of the major families of the kingdom. Could this Fergus family be a hidden family? The various large and small families were all slightly surprised. To be able to force the Wallen family to retreat, this Fergus family was not simple. Many of them looked at the Wallen family with mocking gazes. Just because the family was powerful and domineering, they had finally kicked an iron plate. It's him. There was a group of people next to a large tent. Among them was a pair of brother and sister with green hair. They were the brother and sister that Gray had seen in Mercenary City. Although I knew that he wasn't simple, I didn't expect him to be Gray Fergus. The green-haired young man, Elijah, said in surprise. He's the one who suppressed the young experts of the Flame Kingdom at the banquet. The green-haired's daughter, Samantha, looked, and the Fergus families is this. They have the same name, and they have a grudge against the Warren family. They should be the same person. The green-haired young man's. Although the various families did not permit the events of that banquet to be spread, the families did not have such misgivings. The two of them had heard about it from within their families. He really forced the Wallen family to retreat. The nobles who had come with Gray were all in a daze. They hadn't expected Gray to really force the Wallen family to retreat and make the Marquis family take the initiative to retreat. Let's go. Didn't you want to see the tomb of the king? Greeting the several aristocratic children who were still in a daze, Gray walked towards the king's graveyard. The few aristocratic children came to their senses, and with a burst of excitement, they followed one after another. As they approached, the tomb of the king appeared before their eyes. This was a forest of stone that covered an area of 100 meters. Large rocks were erected one after another. The surface of these rocks was covered in dense runes and patterns. Their radiance was restrained, and they didn't seem dangerous at all. But all the information they had heard about this tomb indicated that this forest of stone was extremely dangerous. Up until now, even a barbarian blood warrior had died. Who knew how many existences below the berserk blood warrior had died? Look, that's... The nobles also knew that it was extremely dangerous and didn't dare to get too close. They only stood in the distance and sized it up. Suddenly, one of the noble ladies cried out in alarm and pointed in a direction. Everyone's gaze followed the direction she was pointing at. Immediately, they saw a charred mark on the ground in that direction. It was the mark of a human figure. Not even a corpse was left behind. The few of them couldn't help but have grave expressions, their eyes filled with shock. Just what kind of power could cause such a degree of destruction? Even the bones had been completely destroyed, leaving behind only a charred mark. There's also, and there, finally, they found quite a few charred marks of a human, totaling more than 100. Each one represented a living person. In other words, at least 100 people had died here. A few of the nobles felt a chill in their hearts. They couldn't help but take a few steps back. They truly felt the danger of the king's tomb. Gray also took a few steps back. Then, an ordinary refined iron weapon suddenly appeared in his hand, and he threw it toward the stone forest. Crackle. As soon as the iron weapon was thrown into the range of the stone forest, the rune patterns on the huge rocks in the stone forest lit up, emitting a devilish purple light. Then, a huge lightning bolt that was more than 10 meters long appeared, roaring and hitting the iron weapon. With a loud boom, the metal weapon exploded into pieces, turning into metal shavings that splattered in all directions. Even the weapon can't withstand it. The nobles were even more shocked. Although it was an extremely ordinary weapon, it was made of refined iron after all, and its hardness was needless to say. However, such a weapon was completely shattered by just one lightning bolt, and this was only the rune mechanism at the outermost periphery of the tomb. According to the previous news, the deeper one went into the tomb, the more powerful the rune mechanism would be. If the periphery was already so powerful, it was hard to imagine how destructive it would be in the depths of the tomb. The nobles looked at the king's graveyard in horror. Even Gray had a serious look on his face. There's a stone tablet there. Everyone looked into the depths of the stone forest and saw a huge stone tablet that was more than 10 meters tall, surrounded by many rocks. There were no written records on the stone tablet. There was only a symbol that looked like a winding branch, like a tree, and like a lightning bolt. Which King Stage powerhouse's symbol is this? Gray carefully recalled the records of some King Stage powerhouses he had read in books, but he couldn't find a King Stage powerhouse that corresponded to this symbol. King Stage powerhouses were extremely mysterious and powerful, and there were very few books that recorded them. Moreover, few people dared to write about such existences. After all, if they were displeased, it was very likely that they would be killed or even exterminated. With my current defense, it should be very difficult to break through these rune puppets, but I can give it a try. Following Gray's thought, a huge blood beast that was 6 meters long appeared on the sand. The blood beast was covered in purple scales, had slender limbs, and a sharp head. It was a barbaric-level blood beast that Gray had killed when he returned from the capital. Without the ability to be a blood beast, this blood beast combat power was much weaker than that of a barbaric-level blood beast. It was not suitable to be used as a corpse control target. However, Gray still controlled it. His purpose was to test the power of the rune mechanism at the tomb. He wanted to see if he could metallize and pass through the rune mechanism. Blood beast. What a huge blood beast. Is this a barbaric-level blood beast? The sudden appearance of the gigantic blood fiend shocked the nobles, guards, and mercenaries. After Gray explained the situation to them, he directed the barbarian-level blood fiend toward the stone forest. Crackle. As soon as the purple flame beast stepped into the stone forest, a thick lightning bolt struck its body. Boom! With a loud explosion, the violent lightning bolts wreaked havoc and surrounded the purple flame beast. However, after the lightning dissipated, the purple flame beast was not injured. After all, it was a barbaric-level blood beast. Naturally, it cannot be hurt by the lightning bolts at the outermost layer. Crackle! Another lightning bolt struck, but the purple flame beast was still unharmed. Boom! Boom! Gray commanded the purple flame beast to move deeper into the stone forest. Suddenly, lightning bolts struck the purple flame beast continuously. Before the first lightning bolt had completely dissipated, the second lightning bolt had already struck. In the end, the purple flame beast was covered in lightning bolts and moved forward. 10 meters. 20 meters. The distance from the edge of the stone forest to the center was about 50 meters. When it reached 20 meters, the lightning bolts that struck the purple flame beast became extremely violent. Every lightning bolt was extremely thick, like the spears of the thunder god descending from the sky. Boom! As the lightning bolt struck, the purple flame beast's huge body staggered. The scales on the surface of its body were damaged, and the parts of its body that were struck by the lightning were charred black. Obviously, at this depth, even the purple flame beast, a barbaric-level blood beast, had reached its limit. If it continued to move forward, it would not take long for it to be destroyed. What a powerful force! Gray also sucked in a breath of cold air. Just at this depth, the lightning bolts were already able to destroy the defense of a barbaric-level blood beast. How powerful would the lightning bolts be in the deepest part of the stone forest be? Even a desolate blood warrior would not be able to withstand the lightning bolts. Gray hurriedly used his metallization ability to strengthen the purple flame beast's defense. Suddenly, a layer of bronze metallic luster appeared on the surface of the purple flame beast. In a very short period of time, the purple flame beast's body magically transformed from flesh and blood to metal. However, at this moment, the purple flame beast's body was surrounded by lightning bolts. The group of aristocrats and the others who were paying attention did not notice this change. Chapter 351. The purple flame beast's defense had increased significantly after its metallization. The thick lightning bolts could no longer leave any wounds on its body. Gray commanded the purple flame beast to move forward. The purple flame beast was surrounded by lightning bolts, making it look like a thunder beast. 30 meters. The lightning bolts that were as thick as the thunder god's spear became denser and denser. The entire stone forest was covered by lightning bolts. From afar, it looked like a sea of lightning. The purple flame beast was like a small boat sailing on the stormy sea. It capsized several times and got up again. 35 meters. When the purple flame beast was 35 meters away, the thick lightning bolts disappeared and were replaced by a lightning ball with a diameter of 1 meter. Boom! The lightning ball hit the purple flame beast and sent it flying. Its body was charred black and green smoke rose from it. It looked like it was about to combust. Boom! Boom! The lightning balls continued to fall. The purple flame beast was sent flying and crashed into the stones in the stone forest. The stones were covered with engraved patterns. It was unknown whether it was because of the natural hardness of the stones or because they were strengthened by the rune mechanism. But the purple flame beast was not damaged at all. On the contrary, the purple flame beast was covered in wounds. At this point, even the purple flame beast, which had been strengthened by metallization, had reached its limit. Gray had no intention of calling the purple flame beast back. He continued to drive the purple flame beast toward the tombstone in the depths of the stone forest. The purple flame beast was sent flying again and again by the lightning balls, but it was still approaching the tombstone with great difficulty. Finally, the purple flame beast was only 10 meters away from the tombstone. However, at this moment, the connection between Gray and the purple flame beast was completely cut off. The purple flame beast had turned into a huge piece of charcoal. It really won't work. The purple flame beast's defense should be above average among the barbarian-level blood beasts. It was comparable to the copperback dragon, which was at the same level as Gray. Therefore, the purple flame beast's defense after metallization was similar to Gray's. Since the purple flame beast could not withstand the lightning bolts even after metallization, Gray should not be an exception. Therefore, it was impossible for him to barge into the tomb with a strong defense. I'm afraid that even a desolate blood warrior wouldn't be able to do it. Gray estimated that the metallized purple flame beast defense should be comparable to that of a desolate blood warrior. But even so, it still stopped 10 meters away from the tombstone. Based on this, even desolate blood warriors would find it difficult to get close to the tombstone. Unless it was someone who had already completed 1 or even 2 rounds of cultivation and was far stronger than the average desolate blood warrior, it was impossible for them to succeed. We can only see if Master Herman, who was invited by the Addison family, can break the runic mechanism. Since he couldn't force his way in, he could only see if he could break through the mechanism. If that didn't work, he could only give up. Although a king's treasure was good, one needed to have the strength to take it. They couldn't even get close to it, let alone open the door of the tomb and enter. Even if I can decipher the rune mechanism, I'm afraid I won't be allowed to enter. Thinking of this, Gray raised his eyebrows. The Addison family must have paid a huge price to invite Master Herman. If he could decipher the runic mechanism, they wouldn't easily allow factions other than the Addison family to enter. If that was the case, then it would be troublesome. Gray had already provoked the Duke Nahum's family, and he didn't want to provoke the Duke Addison's family. Moreover, the Addison family might have brought desolate blood warriors this time. He might not be a match for them. I can only take it one step at a time. Since he had already come this far, it would be a pity to retreat. He could only watch the situation and act according to the circumstances. After retreating from the vicinity of the king's tomb, Gray and the nobles set up tents in an empty area. They prepared to settle down and observe the situation. We're really fated to meet again. At this moment, a young man and a young woman walked over and called out to Gray. Yeah, I didn't expect to meet you here. Gray smiled. The two people in front of him were the green-haired siblings that Gray had met in Mercenary City. Let's get to know each other. I'm Elijah Addison, and this is my sister, Samantha Addison. Gray Fergus. Gray looked at the two in surprise before pointing at himself. Although he had already guessed that the siblings were not simple, he didn't expect them to be so complicated. They were actually from a duke's family and the Addison family that he was worried about provoking. We know. We've heard about what happened at the banquet in the capital, Elijah said with a smile. Speaking of which, we have to thank you for suppressing the young experts of the Flame Kingdom and saving face for the younger generation of the Purple Moon Kingdom. I just happened to be there. If you were there at the time, I'm afraid I wouldn't have had the chance to show myself. Gray smiled and said with a deeper meaning. From Elijah's body, Gray could sense an extraordinary aura. If Gray's guess wasn't wrong, Elijah should be a barbarian blood warrior just like him, with the strength of a barbarian blood warrior. If he was in the capital, he could have suppressed the blue-haired young man and wouldn't have had the chance to show himself. Elijah didn't deny it. He was quite confident in his own strength. Speaking of which, you really surprised me. Among the 3 highnesses of the royal family, Her Highness Sophia is the most mysterious. Even among us nobles of the kingdom, few people know her. I didn't expect you to know her and have such a close relationship. We only met by chance. Our relationship can only be considered ordinary. Gray shook his head and asked curiously, "You said that Her Highness Sophia is the most mysterious of the three highnesses. Why is that? Her Highness Sophia rarely appears in public, so even though we all know that such a princess exists, there are very few people who truly know her." Samantha explained. So mysterious? Gray was surprised. He didn't expect that even Elijah and his sister, who were from noble families, would rarely know her. He couldn't help but think of his encounter with her in the Empire ruins and the invitation to explore the ruins. Despite being a noble princess, she was often outside, working tirelessly and even risking her life to explore one imperial ruin after another. Her actions could indeed be described as mysterious. Moreover, it is said that the blood technique that Her Highness cultivates is very special. In the history of the Purple Moon Kingdom's royal family, no one has ever cultivated such a blood technique. Samantha continued, "A blood technique that has never appeared before?" Gray couldn't help but think of the last time he fought side by side with Sophia. He saw Sophia's mysterious blood beast ability. In front of her blood beast ability, time seemed to have frozen. Her speed suddenly soared to the extreme, even surpassing the wind leopard blood beast of the same level. Even now, he still couldn't figure out what kind of blood fiend ability the other party possessed, or what kind of blood fiend ability it was. After chatting for a while, Gray asked, "Right, do you know which king-level expert's tomb belongs to this time? From the king-level insignia, it should be the tomb of the Purple Thunder King." Elijah said, "Purple Thunder King." Gray carefully tried to recall, but he did not have the slightest bit of recollection. This was the first time he had heard of the existence of a person like the Purple Thunder King. This is a king-level expert from more than 600 years ago. He was a solitary king. According to the records, he originally had a family, but before he grew up, his family met with a great disaster and was destroyed by a strong enemy. His family was destroyed? Gray couldn't help but think of the reasons why solitary kings were born. Either the family was destroyed by a strong enemy, or by chance, they had a fortuitous encounter and became a king-level expert. Could the blood technique he cultivates be a lightning-type blood technique? Since he was called the Purple Thunder King, his blood technique must have something to do with lightning. Yes, he has indeed cultivated a lightning-type blood technique. However, I do not know what kind of lightning-type blood technique it is. According to the records, his attainments in runes were extremely high. If I'm not wrong, the rune mechanism outside the tomb should have been created by him personally. A king-level expert who is proficient in rune mechanisms? Gray raised his eyebrows. A king-level expert who was proficient in rune mechanisms. This was not good news. Even if they could pass through the stone forest outside and enter the tomb, there would be many powerful rune mechanisms. This made his hair stand on end, and he even had the thought of leaving. This king's tomb was definitely one of the most dangerous king's tombs that had appeared before. Suppressing the thought of leaving, Gray and the other forces waited and watched. A few days later, a team arrived, attracting the attention of all forces, including Gray. This was because in the team, there was an old man whose face was full of age spots and few strands of hair left. This old man was the famous rune master Herman of the Purple Moon Kingdom. Chapter 352. An old man appeared at the edge of the stone forest where the Graveyard of Kings was located. He walked slowly along the edge of the stone forest. The old man's face was full of age spots. His hair was sparse, and his back was severely hunched. He held a walking stick in his hand. No matter how one looked at him, he was an extremely ordinary old man. However, he attracted the attention of everyone, including Gray. The old man walked along the edge of the stone forest. After a few steps, he stopped. His gaze fell on the dense rune patterns on the stones. He nodded and shook his head. Occasionally, there would be a flash of light. The old man took a few hours to walk through the stone forest that was only 100 meters away. "Grandpa Herman, you've worked hard. Please rest here." Elijah and Samantha personally went forward and helped the old man to a tent that had been set up to rest. A few of the major factions present sent their representatives in. Gray was also allowed to enter because of his strength and his relationship with Elijah and Samantha. After resting for a while, Elijah asked politely, "Grandpa Herman, how's the situation?" "It's very troublesome. As the rumors say, the Purple Thunder King's attainments in runes have indeed reached an extremely high level. This rune mechanism is definitely one of the most powerful rune mechanisms I've ever seen." Master Herman sighed. Hearing the other party's words, the hearts of Gray and the representatives of the other large factions could not help but sink. Although they had long known that this runic mechanism was not simple, they did not expect Master Herman to have such a high valuation of it. If even this person could not do anything, they might really have to give up. "Grandpa Herman, can you crack it?" Samantha asked. "It's very difficult. I don't have much confidence. Moreover, I need many people to cooperate." Master Herman neither nodded nor shook his head. "What do you need us to do?" "Master Herman, please tell us. I believe the various factions present will not refuse to cooperate." A black-haired, middle-aged man glanced at the representatives of the various factions and said, he came from the Duke Kenneth family that still had a king-level expert. In terms of strength, the Duke Kenneth family was definitely the strongest among the three Duke families. "Yes, Master Herman, please tell us. As long as we can do it, we will definitely not refuse." The representatives of the various factions spoke one after another. Even Gray expressed his stance. If they could not crack the rune mechanism in the Graveyard of Kings, everything would be in vain. Therefore, no faction was unwilling to cooperate in cracking the rune mechanism. After all, this was what they wanted to see. Moreover, if they were to shrink back now and were unwilling to cooperate, they would definitely be rejected by the other factions. They would not be allowed to enter the Graveyard of Kings. "I need 8 barbarian blood warriors to cooperate with me. Moreover, this process is extremely dangerous," Master Herman said solemnly. The representatives of the various factions' hearts, but they still spoke. The Duke Kenneth family is willing. The Cumberland is willing. The 7 factions is, and among them, Gray's expression was the most relaxed. With the ability to control corpses, he obviously did not need to personally go into battle. There is almost no need to worry about his safety. Master Herman did not act immediately. After confirming that he had gathered 8 barbarian warriors, he began his long preparation. He took out piece after piece of purple stone that was as thick as an adult's thigh. After a simple cut, he began to draw complicated rune patterns on it. In the end, the entire purple stone was covered with rune patterns. On the second day, outside the stone forest of the Graveyard of Kings, Gray and the other 7 barbarian warriors, who were controlling the barbarian ants, stood in 8 different directions of the stone forest. They were ready to act at any time. The other people from the various factions appeared near the stone forest and paid close attention to what was happening. Whether or not they could crack the rune mechanism would depend on this. If even Master Herman could not crack the rune mechanism, they could only give up unless they could get a king-level expert to help. However, it was very difficult to do so. Even the Duke Kenneth family, who had a king-level expert, would find it difficult to get a king-level expert to help. The current king-level powerhouses of the Purple Moon Kingdom were all in seclusion for many years in order to break through to a higher realm, increase their strength, and prolong their lifespan. Unless their family was in an unimaginable crisis, they would not take action under normal circumstances. Moreover, as king-level experts, they were very disgusted with such matters. After all, they would definitely enter their graves in the future. If they were in a different situation, they would not want their resting place to be disturbed. "You can act now," Master Herman said solemnly with a rune space bag in his hand. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Hearing the order, Gray controlled the barbarian ants and the 7 barbarian blood warriors to charge into the stone forest. Crackle! The moment they rushed into the stone forest, the entire stone forest was suddenly filled with thunder and lightning, attacking them. Facing the lightning bolts that were attacking them, the barbarian blood warriors of the Duke Kenneth family suddenly released ice balls that flew out and shattered the lightning bolts. At the same time, the barbarian blood warriors were also smashed into pieces. A wall formed by lightning appeared in front of the barbarian blood warriors of the Addison family, blocking all the lightning bolts that were attacking them. Every time the lightning wall was destroyed, it would immediately regenerate. The barbarian blood warriors of the Wallen family kept dodging and evading the lightning bolts that were attacking them. The barbarian ants relied on their own defense and charged straight into the stone forest without dodging. The 7 barbarian blood warriors and the barbarian ants relied on their own methods to quickly charge into the depths of the stone forest. As they went deeper into the stone forest, the lightning bolts triggered by the rune mechanism became even more ferocious. It was as if a sea of lightning was descending. When they reached 20 meters, the power of the lightning had reached the limits of the 7 barbarian blood warriors and the barbarian ants. If they continued to charge forward, even if they had the strength of a barbarian, it would not take long for them to be turned into charcoal by the violent lightning bolts. At this point, they stopped, neither advancing nor retreating. They were in a deadlock. Countless bolts of lightning were triggered, and like a torrential storm, they violently attacked them. Now's the time. At this moment, Master Elman's eyes shone brightly. His stooped body seemed to have become a few decades younger. He continuously took out purple stones that were full of veined patterns from his rune space bag and accurately threw them into the stone forest. Surprisingly, when faced with the purple stones that were thrown into the stone forest, although lightning appeared and attacked the purple stones, the power of the lightning was extremely weak and was unable to damage the purple stones. The power has been restrained. Gray's eyes lit up as he guessed the reason. Although the rune mechanism was powerful, it had its limits. When the 7 barbarian blood warriors and the barbarian blood fiend charged into the stone forest from 8 different directions, most of the power of the rune mechanism was immediately attracted to them. That was why the lightning bolts that were thrown into the stone forest were so weak. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Master Elman quickly threw the purple stones into the stone forest. Every stone he threw was not thrown randomly, but seemed to follow a certain pattern. As he threw the stones, he quickly ran around the stone forest. After running one round, he had already thrown out more than 300 purple stones. Retreat! Suddenly, he shouted a warning. The next moment, the 300 purple stones that he threw out lit up one after another and formed an array that was even more complicated than the hexagram array. Boom, boom, boom. The array that was even more complicated than the hexagram array seemed to have been embedded into the rune mechanism of the stone forest, becoming a part of it. Then, the originally violent lightning bolts became even more violent. The rumbling of thunder connected the heavens and the earth, and from afar, a dazzling purple light descended. Lightning bolts shot out crazily, attacking everything in its path. Not only did it attack the barbarian ants and the 7 barbarian blood warriors, but even the veined stones in the stone forest were attacked. The attacks became chaotic, and the target could no longer be identified. Boom! The Orca family's barbarian blood warrior could not dodge in time and was directly struck by a bolt of lightning. His entire body was char-black as he was sent flying. The barbarian ants and the other barbarian blood warriors could not dodge in time and were all attacked by the devastating lightning bolts. Kacha, kacha! Under the powerful and aimless attack of the lightning bolts, the stones in the stone forest began to show signs of cracking. Finally, all the stones cracked. Rumble. Finally, the violent lightning bolts swept out in all directions like waves. Retreat. Such a terrifying change caused Gray and the others, who were observing nearby, to change their expressions as they hurriedly retreated. Those who retreated slowly and were not strong enough were swept by the purple lightning and instantly exploded. They did not even have time to scream before they were turned into ashes. The people watching from afar were drenched in cold sweat. After retreating for a few hundred meters, Gray and the others finally stopped in shock. In the distance, the stone forest where the king's graveyard was located had disappeared. The ground within a few hundred meters was charred black, and only a stone tablet that was more than 10 meters tall stood there quietly. The rune mechanism had been broken. Chapter 353. Other than a giant stone tablet standing in the middle of the tomb of the king, The rest of the ground was scorched black. Rocks and sand melted and stuck together, forming a giant crystal with a diameter of several hundred meters. Among them, one could occasionally see some charred black bone fragments. Those were the remains of those who were unable to escape from the violent lightning and were swept into this world. At least 100 people had died in the chaos of the lightning. Under the violent lightning, many of them did not even have the time to scream before dying. Although Master Herman had warned everyone not to get too close, who would pay attention to such a warning in front of the treasures in the tomb of the king, very few people listened to such a warning. Most of them treated it as alarmist talk to prevent them from fighting for the treasures in the tomb of the king. What terrifying lightning! Just a little bit more, and we would have lost our lives. Luckily, we retreated quickly. I should have listened to Master Herman's warning. Dana and the others were swallowed by the lightning. The survivors either had fear written all over their faces or were grieving for the deaths of their companions. Their voices were mixed together. At least 100 people died. Although they were close to the tomb of the king, Gray had the strength of a barbaric blood warrior, so he was one of the people who had successfully escaped. Even though he had known that the tomb of the king was extremely dangerous, he still could not help but feel shocked when he saw 100 people die in front of him. After all, these were people who had flesh and blood a few seconds ago. Now, only bones were left. Some of them did not even have bones left. With the protection of the experts of the Addison family, Master Herman also managed to escape. Seeing so many people die, he let out a helpless sigh. Grandpa Herman, don't blame yourself. These people who died were blinded by greed. You tried to dissuade them, but no one was willing to listen. Samantha comforted him. Yes, Master Herman, don't blame yourself. These people were killed by their own greed. The other major forces also spoke up. Gray looked at the group of survivors and saw the few noble children who came with him. They were not injured, but they looked a little embarrassed. It was because they had bumped into people in the panic just now. They had not come for the treasures within the king's tomb. Instead, they had come to pay their respects to the king's tomb. After receiving Gray's warning, they had all looked at the king's tomb from afar. As such, even though their strength was not very high, they had all survived. After that, Gray looked at the brute force ant at his feet. Half of its body was charred black. Although it was severely injured, it was still alive and not destroyed. He put away. He only needed to leave the desert, find a forest, and use the reverse nurturing ability to recover. The 7 barbaric blood warriors that worked together with the barbarian ants had also survived. However, they were all heavily injured and would need to rest for a long time to recover. They would definitely not be able to participate in the next exploration of the king's tomb. After confirming that there was no danger, everyone gathered their courage and stepped on the charred stone slabs. They walked towards the tombstone in the center. Every step they took was extremely cautious and careful, afraid that there would be rune mechanisms left behind. However, until they passed through the hundreds of meters of charred ground and arrived in front of the tombstone that was more than 10 meters tall, there were no rune mechanisms triggered. It was obvious that the rune mechanisms had been completely destroyed in the explosion just now. This is a star stone. No wonder it was not destroyed in the explosion just now. After approaching it, Gray carefully looked at the tombstone and found that the material of the tombstone was extremely special. The surface of the light purple material was sparkling like stars in the night sky. This was a special stone material that Gray had once seen in a book, The Starstone. It was said that this was a precious stone material that came from beyond the heavens. The material was very sturdy and was an excellent material for drawing runes. It was extremely precious. The same volume of stone material was more than 10 times the value of gold. Who would have thought that there would be a large piece here that was more than 10 meters tall? Gray tilted his head and looked at Master Herman. As expected, he saw the shock in Master Herman's eyes. To a rune master like him, this kind of stone material was no different from a blood warrior's weapon. There are words here. Everyone quickly discovered that there was not only the lightning symbol on the tombstone. There are also words on it. However, due to the many stones in the stone forest, it was impossible to see them from the outside. The tomb of the Purple Thunder King. This really is the tomb of the Purple Thunder King. Kingdom Calendar 327. Kingdom Calendar 751. If we calculate it this way, wouldn't the Purple Thunder King have lived for 424 years? How can this be? Usually, the lifespan of a king-level master would not exceed 300 years. How can the Purple Thunder King live for 400 years? Many people's faces were filled with shock and suspicion. Their understanding of king-level masters was very limited. However, they also knew that the lifespan of a king-level master would not exceed 300 years. So when they suddenly heard that the Purple Thunder King had lived for 400 years, their hearts were filled with suspicion and disbelief. Did he take some precious medicine that could extend his life? Or was it because he was extremely strong and had evolved to an extremely high level? There was also a small group of people who were shocked. Gray was one of them. If it was only because he had taken some precious medicine that could extend his life, then it would be fine. However, if he had not taken any precious medicine and had relied on his own evolution to achieve such a long lifespan, then that was terrifying. The lifespan of an ordinary king-level master was close to 300 years. For the Purple Thunder King to live for 400 years, it was very likely that he had completed 3 evolutions. Completing 4 evolutions would allow one to become an existence above the king level. For the Purple Thunder King to complete 3 evolutions, he was only 1 evolution away from becoming an existence above the king level. One could imagine how powerful he had been when he was alive. Gotcha! Everyone surrounded the tombstone. Some people even reached out to touch the words. After all, it was very likely that this had been written by a king-level master. Suddenly, someone pressed on a protrusion on the tombstone. The tombstone suddenly trembled violently. Not good. With the previous lesson, everyone was shocked. Like frightened birds, they fled from the tombstone. They retreated hundreds of meters before stopping. However, the terrifying mechanism did not appear. Instead, the huge tombstone was slowly sinking. Finally, the entire tombstone sank into the ground. At the same time, an entrance appeared on the surface. It's the entrance, the treasure is inside. Quick, don't let others take it. The people who had been fleeing for their lives just now had bloodshot eyes. They wished they had an extra pair of legs to run toward the entrance. However, the people from the 7 major forces were faster than them. In just a few moments, the people from the 7 major forces had formed a circle around the entrance to the king's tomb, confronting the people from the other forces. Why? Why can't we go in? You're too overbearing. Everyone has a share in the king's tomb. The entrance to the king's tomb was right in front of them, but there were people blocking the way. The people from these forces were like red-eyed gamblers. They gathered together, and their number was several times that of the 7 major forces. They abandoned their fear of the 7 major forces and put pressure on them together. Why? Because we helped break the rune mechanism, but you didn't. Facing people who were several times their number, the people from the 7 major forces did not have the slightest intention of backing down. Even Gray, although he did not make a move, had no intention of letting these people enter the king's tomb. The current situation was different from when he was blocked a few days ago. At that time, the Wallen family did not contribute anything to the king's tomb. The king's tomb did not belong to the Wallen family. Naturally, there was no reason to stop him from approaching the king's tomb. However, it was different now. In order to open the entrance to the king's tomb, he and the 7 major forces had paid a great price. Each of the 7 major forces had a barbarian blood warrior seriously injured. Gray had also paid the price of half of a barbarian blood beast. After paying such a high price, they naturally would not allow these forces who had not contributed anything to enter. Ignoring these snobbish people, Gray and the 7 major forces began to discuss how to arrange for people to enter. After discussion, the final decision was that the Addison family, because they had invited Master Herman and had helped break the rune mechanism, would allow 20 people to enter. Gray and the other 6 forces would allow 10 people to enter. Seeing that the 7 major forces were determined not to let them enter, the other snobbish people were anxious, but they could only helplessly do so. Although they had a lot of people, if they really fought with the seven major forces, they did not have much of a chance of winning. After all, the seven major forces had sent the absolute elites this time. Sir, you're only one person. Please sell me a place. I am willing to pay 100,000. Sell it to me. I am willing to pay 200,000. However, there were also some people who were keenly aware of the opportunity. One after another, they surrounded Gray and tried to buy a place from Gray. In the end, Gray sold the 9 places at the price of 200,000 gold coins per place. Before entering the king's tomb, they had already made a small profit. Green was quite satisfied. He did not give the places to the nobles. After all, they were not strong enough. If they went in, it would be no different from throwing away their lives. Although the rune mechanism outside the tomb had been destroyed, it did not mean that there were no more rune mechanisms inside. Moreover, if there were treasures later, the major forces would definitely fight over them. After gathering the number of people, the group of 80 people walked up the stairs to the king's tomb. The inside of the tomb was not dim. Instead, there was light coming from the rune lamp. When the entrance to the tomb was opened, the rune lamp inside the tomb had been activated. After walking down the stairs for almost 100 meters, they finally reached the end. Gray and the others entered a huge room. Chapter 354. It was a huge room. The walls, floor, and ceiling were all paved with white jade stone. It was covered in exquisite patterns. Even after hundreds of years, it was still extremely beautiful. On the left and right sides, there were many rooms. Many of them were filled with dusty daily necessities. On the innermost side, there was a long passageway that stretched as far as the eye could see. This did not look like a place for the dead. Instead, it looked like a place for the living to live. It's just as the rumors say. When a king-level expert has a premonition that he is about to die, he will build a tomb and live in it until the moment of his death. Only then will he enter the depths of the tomb and bury himself. A middle-aged man who had read many books on this topic said. Gray and the others looked at the passageway. It was as if they were looking at a king-level expert who had once been a peerless hero. Now he was old and lonely. Step by step, he staggered into the passageway and finally buried himself in the depths of the tomb. The most heartless thing in the world was not the human heart, but the passage of time. Even a king-level expert could not escape the ravages of time. Like a normal person, he would eventually welcome the end of his life and turn into a pile of yellow soil. This teacup is made of moonwood. I heard that if you use this wood to hold tea and drink it over a long period of time, it can help with your cultivation. This stone table is made from a precious rune material, purple sandstone. Even if it was just a simple residence of a king-level expert before his death, it was still not simple. The teacup, stone table, bed, and even the decorations were not ordinary items. Everyone was crazily fighting for them, grabbing everything they could see in their hands. Gray was no exception. He took a stone table and 5 stone chairs. They were all made of stone called thundercloud stone. This was an excellent material for drawing rune mechanisms. If he sold it to a rune master who needed it, he would definitely be able to sell it for a sky-high price. In the end, the entire hall and even the other rooms were all swept clean, leaving nothing behind. The 90 people, including Gray, looked at the endless passageway behind the room. Many of them had fervent looks in their eyes. Just a residence that the Purple Thunder King once lived in already had such a huge harvest. Then, how precious would the items buried in the Purple Thunder King's tomb be? Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Many people rushed into the tunnel. Gray hesitated for a moment before following them. Although he knew that there was bound to be danger inside, since he had already come here, how could he shrink back? The huge passageway could accommodate more than a dozen people running side by side. Even with 90 people running in it, it did not seem crowded. Instead, it was quite spacious. Puff! Suddenly, a middle-aged man from the Kenneth family who was charging at the very front suddenly fell to the ground. After that, he was unable to crawl back up. The people at the side looked over and were immediately shocked. They saw a pool of dark red blood under the other party's body. When they turned the other party's body over, they saw that the other party's body was covered with sharp blades. His eyes were wide open. At that moment, the other party had clearly discovered the danger, but it was already too late to dodge. To be one of the 10 chosen by Duke Kenneth's family, the other party's strength was naturally not weak. However, even so, the other party did not even have the time to dodge before dying. From this, one could imagine how powerful this mechanism was. After a careful search, he discovered that a stone slab beside his corpse had sunk slightly, while a stone slab in front of him was densely packed with holes. Clearly, those sharp blades had shot out from these holes. It was not only this middle-aged man. When a middle-aged man fell, other people fell one after another. Some of them did not even have the time to scream before they died. The screams of others became their last sounds at this moment. Hearing the continuous screams, Gray's heart suddenly trembled. It was obvious that there was a mechanism in the passageway. Gotcha! At this moment, he suddenly felt the stone slab under his feet loosen and sink down. Then, a stone slab above his head suddenly slid open and a hole appeared. Swish, swish, swish. From the hole, a large number of metal blades shot out. Each of them shone with a cold light and shot straight for his head. Clank, clank, clank. Just as these metal blades were about to hit Gray, they suddenly lost their momentum and slid down powerlessly, falling to the ground. At the crucial moment, Gray used his ability to control metal and forcefully stopped the metal blades that were attacking him, resolving the crisis. Whoosh! A figure passed by Gray and quickly rushed into the depths of the passageway. It was the green-haired young man, Elijah. His sister, Samantha, did not follow, but he did. He did not care about the mechanisms at all as he rushed forward. It was not that he knew how to avoid triggering the mechanisms, but that every time he triggered a mechanism, he would send out a bolt of lightning to blast away the metal blades that were attacking him. At the same time, no less than 10 people made the same choice as him. They also used various methods to resist the mechanisms and quickly rush forward. The mechanisms in the passageway were obviously not as powerful as the runic mechanisms outside. They were not much of a threat to the barbarian blood warriors. Whoosh! Gray hurriedly followed. There were many mechanisms in the passageway. Every 10 meters or so, a mechanism would be triggered. However, every time a mechanism was about to hit Gray, it would suddenly stop and fall to the ground. After rushing forward for 100 meters, his eyes suddenly opened up. A huge space like the one before appeared. This is the runic room. In the room, there were many long tables with a large number of runic tools and materials. If there were no surprises, this should be the place where the Purple Thunder King usually made runic items. Gray was not the first to arrive. Before him, several people had already arrived. These people all had a runic space bag and quickly swept the good things they saw into it. Gray joined them. He was different from the others who swept away the good things. He swept everything he saw into the purple ring. Anyway, the space inside the purple ring was huge, so there was no need to worry about not being able to fit everything. Suddenly, Gray saw a weapon similar to a crossbow on a stone platform in the room, as well as 3 things that seemed to be a set of arrows. The crossbow-like object and the 3 objects that looked like a set of arrows were full of complicated and intricate rune patterns. They looked extremely extraordinary, although he did not know what kind of weapon it was. But if it appeared in the Purple Thunder King's runic room, its power must be extraordinary. Whoosh! Gray quickly rushed towards the crossbow and the 3 arrows, reaching out to grab them. At this moment, a withered hand also reached out to grab the 2 things. Shwa! Gray was closer to the 2 items. He quickly grabbed the 2 items in his hands and dodged to the side to open up some distance. The withered hand grabbed nothing. Gray Fergus handed over. I found it first. A thin old man was fighting with Gray over the items. He was one of the 2 barbarian blood warriors of the Wallen family. Seeing Gray snatch the 2 things away, his face darkened. You found it first? Is there an order of arrival for ownerless items? Gray disdainfully laughed, not to mention that he was suspicious of the other party's words. Even if the other party had really found it first, he would not hand it over. Not to mention the conflict between him and the Wallen family. In the king's tomb, everything was ownerless. There was no order of arrival, so he would not hand it over. At this moment, the other members of the Wallen family arrived. But including the thin old man, there were only 8 people. 2 of them had most likely died in a mechanism. Gray Fergus. The 8 people in Gray confronted each other, faintly sealing off Gray's escape route. Their bodies emitted a cold, killing intent. If you want to fight, then go ahead. Looking coldly at the thin old man, Gray released the 2 barbarian blood fiends. They were like 2 huge walls in front of him. This time, the Wallen family had sent a total of 2 barbarian blood warriors. However, one of them had been seriously injured when breaking the rune mechanism, so only the thin old man had entered the tomb. With his current strength, even if he did not touch the barbarian blood fiends, he was confident that he could suppress them. However, he noticed that the thin old man had a weapon at his waist. The hilt of the weapon was made of a precious metal and was inlaid with colorful gems. It could be seen that this magic weapon was not simple. This was probably the only weapon that the Wallen family had. He did not know how powerful it was, so he released the 2 barbarian blood fiends. They could be used as meat shields at a critical moment. After looking deeply at Gray, the thin old man finally restrained himself. He did not attack Gray and took the initiative to leave the room. Gray kept the 2 barbarian blood fiends and quickly left the room that he had already searched. He searched the other rooms. The Wallen family had concerns, but so did he. The power of the magic weapon in the thin old man's hand was still unknown. Even if he wanted to kill the Wallen family, he could not do it here. After all, there were many families present, and he did not have the ability to kill all of them. One after another, the people from the various families who had fallen behind arrived. However, there were less than 80 people left. Under the mechanism, just now, more than 10 people had died. On the other hand, the various families had also gained a lot. The tomb of the king was full of treasures. Every item was extremely valuable to the people present. After searching all the rooms, Gray did not find anything. Without hesitation, he followed the inner passage and continued to go deeper. The others also made the same choice. Crackle. Suddenly, the rune patterns on the wall of the passage flickered. A ball of flame suddenly descended. A young man who was rushing forward was attacked by the flame and turned into ashes. And this was not the only flame. It was as if a mechanism had been triggered. Large balls of flame were continuously attacking Gray and the others. Chapter 355. Retreat, retreat quickly. Seeing the power of the flames, many people hurriedly retreated as if they were avoiding snakes and scorpions. To be able to burn a living person to ashes, one could imagine how high the temperature of the flame was. Many people felt fear in their hearts and quickly retreated. However, the speed of the flames was extremely fast. Even if they were on guard, many people were not able to dodge in time. Occasionally, there would be people screaming as they turned into ashes. A man from the Wallen family saw a blur in front of his eyes and was already covered by a ball of flames. The flames burned his body, and he was in extreme pain. He screamed at the top of his lungs, but it was of no use. In the end, he turned into ashes. Save me, a member of the Oka family was covered in flames. He painfully begged the people around him for help, but the people around him avoided him as if he was a snake. He fell to the ground in pain, rolling on the ground, but in the end, he couldn't escape the fate of being burned to ashes. A man from the Cumberland family was drenched in cold sweat. He jumped to the side to dodge the flames, but his left arm was swept by the flames. Rip. Silently, the place where his left arm was swept by the flames was charred black and eventually turned into ashes. The flames even spread up his arm. Puff! He clenched his teeth, pulled out his sword, and slashed down. Blood splattered as his left arm was cut off. Then, before the severed left arm fell to the ground, it had already turned into ashes. If he did not make a prompt decision to cut off his arm, the flames would have spread to his body. If the flames spread to his body, the result could be imagined. He was in so much pain that he broke out in cold sweat and retreated. However, there were also some people who did not retreat, but advanced towards the flames that were filled with destructive aura. Chi-Chi. Facing the incoming flames, an elder from the Kenneth family waved his hand. A ball of white cold air appeared and attacked the flames. With a sizzling sound, the flames were instantly extinguished. All existences below the barbaric blood warrior level retreat. An elder of the Addison family calmly ordered. Then, a bolt of purple lightning shot towards the flames, instantly extinguishing them. Chi-Chi, an old man who didn't come from a Marquis family, but his family's background wasn't any worse than a Marquis family's. A misty yellow light twined around his longsword. With a slash of his sword, the flames were immediately extinguished. Poochie, Gray was also one of them. As he rushed forward, a wind blade slashed out in front of him, slashing at the flames. Immediately, the flames were cut in half and dissipated while he rushed through. Just like that, Gray charged forward while slashing out the attacking flames. After moving forward for a few dozen meters, he was finally able to pass through the area filled with flames. There were only 12 people who had passed like him, and they were from the 7 great factions. They were all berserker blood warriors, and he even felt that 2 of them were desolate blood warriors because he could faintly sense danger from them. It seems that King Thunderclap really doesn't want anyone to disturb his sleep. Not far from Gray, Elijah said with a slight frown. Just as Gray had guessed, the other party was indeed a barbarian blood warrior. No wonder the Addison family would be at ease with a direct descendant like him entering the tomb. No king-level expert would want his peace to be disturbed after his death. I hope there are no mechanisms as powerful as the rune mechanisms on the surface. Otherwise, even we would be in great danger. Gray said with a wry smile, "It shouldn't be possible." Master Herman said that the passage is not too wide, and it would be difficult to set up such powerful rune mechanisms. Elijah shook his head. Master Herman did not follow. On one hand, it was too dangerous below. On the other hand, according to his estimation, the mechanisms in the tomb should not be as powerful as the rune mechanisms on the surface. Including Gray, a total of 13 people continued to move forward. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. After moving forward for about 10 meters, another mechanism was triggered. A large number of green wind blades appeared out of thin air, and each of them was able to cut gold and jade. They broke through the air and quickly slashed toward Gray and the others. Boom, boom. Gray and the others used their own methods. Some used lightning, some used flames, and some raised their swords to shatter the wind blades. After moving forward for another few dozen meters, they were able to rush out of the range of the wind blades. The power is gradually increasing. After breaking through the range of the wind blades, Gray and the others looked solemn. Since entering the tomb, from the initial mechanism to now, they could clearly feel that the power of the mechanism was rapidly increasing. If the power continued to increase, even the brute blood warriors would find it difficult to withstand. Although they faintly felt that something was wrong, it was impossible for them to retreat. Ice rune mechanism. High-pressure water blade, rune mechanism. As they continued to move forward, they passed through 2 more rune mechanisms. The power of the 2 rune mechanisms was stronger than the previous one, especially the high-pressure water blade rune mechanism at the back. Its power was incomparable. Although no one died, several people were injured. It should be known that the strength of the people present was at least at the brute blood warrior level, but they were still injured. One could imagine the power of the high-pressure water blade rune mechanism. The further we go, the more powerful the rune mechanism is. This is King Thunderclap's warning to us to retreat immediately. If we continue to move forward, the power of the rune mechanism will become even greater. Gray and the others looked solemn. Coming here, many of them were about to reach their limit, but it was obvious that they had not reached the final tomb yet. There should be more powerful rune mechanisms ahead. But even if they knew that the rune mechanisms ahead were more powerful, it was impossible for them to retreat at this time. Gray and the others continued to move forward. Boom, boom, boom. After moving forward for more than 10 meters, another mechanism was triggered. It was earth elemental rocks one after another. Each of them was like a powerful bomb. After colliding, there would be a terrifying explosion immediately. Moreover, the speed was extremely fast, and the number was extremely dense. Boom! A Kenneth Brute Blood Warrior could not dodge in time and was hit directly. In the explosion, he flew backward and hit the wall on the side. Puff! He suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. His chest caved in, and he was seriously injured. At this moment, another earth elemental rock hit him. The look in his eyes suddenly became horrified. Caca. However, the earth elemental rock did not hit him. Before the earth elemental rock hit him, a cloud of cold air appeared and froze the earth elemental rock, completely freezing it. It was an old man from the Kenneth family who had made a move. And this old man was the one Gray suspected to have the strength of a desolate blood warrior. Puff, puff, puff. At this moment, Gray's expression became solemn. He was fully focused and slashed out wind blades, cutting the earth elemental rocks that were coming at him. Every earth elemental rock was extremely powerful, enough to seriously injure a brute blood warrior. He did not want to try. In the distance, the skinny elder from the Wallen family pulled out the magic weapon hanging on his waist and slashed out continuously. Every time he slashed out, a red flame would appear and meet the earth elemental rocks. Every red flame was extremely powerful. When it came into contact with the earth elemental rocks, it easily burned the earth elemental rocks into ashes. The weapon in his opponent's hand was indeed an extremely powerful magic weapon. It was at least a bronze-grade weapon, and among bronze-grade weapons, it was definitely one of the best. Otherwise, it would not be able to have such power. Gray was naturally extremely vigilant against his opponent. Even in battle, he was always on guard. Under his watch, his opponent passed through the range of the earth elemental rocks. Suddenly, he saw his opponent turn around and look at him with a gloomy expression. His gaze was ice-cold. Not good. This old man wants to attack me here. Seeing his opponent's gaze, Gray's expression immediately changed. Even if his opponent had such a magic weapon in his hand, he was not afraid at all. He believed that with his current strength, if he were to fight with his opponent, he would definitely win. However, at this moment, he was under the attack of the earth elemental rocks. If he was distracted by his opponent's attack, it was very likely that he would be attacked by the earth elemental rocks. Whoosh! Sure enough, the skinny old man from the Warren family attacked him. With a slash of his blade, a sharp scarlet flame shot towards him like a flaming blade falling from the sky. Whoosh! Not daring to hold back, Gray used a combination of ice and wind blades. A large number of wind blades with ice blades rushed out and collided with the red flame. Boom! The two collided violently, and then both of them disappeared. What a powerful blood fiend ability. This is a combination of ice and wind blade blood fiend ability. All the barbarian blood warriors who were paying attention to this scene could not help but be shocked. They did not expect Gray to be able to use such a powerful blood fiend ability. It was obvious that before this, Gray had been holding back. Among the people present, his opponent was the youngest. However, they did not expect his strength to be among the top in the past 10 years. Even at the barbarian level, the mutation still has such a strong amplification effect. Some of the more knowledgeable people were shocked. They originally thought that after reaching the barbarian level, the amplification effect of Gray's mutation would weaken. They did not expect that after reaching the barbarian level, the amplification effect would not weaken. How is this possible? How could his blood fiend ability become so powerful? The skinny old man from the Wallen family could not help but be shocked. However, his eyes were filled with ruthlessness as he raised his magical weapon and slashed at Gray. Boom, boom, boom. Suddenly, terrifying explosions sounded one after another. The red flame, slashed by the skinny old man from the Wallen family, and Gray's ice and wind blades continuously collided and were destroyed. They were in a stalemate. However, Gray was not only facing the attacks of the skinny old man from the Wallen family. An earth elemental bullet flew directly at Gray. It hit Gray, who was distracted by the skinny old man from the Wallen family. Gray did not even have time to summon his barbarian-level blood fiend. Boom! The earth elemental bullet hit Gray's body and exploded like a powerful bomb. Gray was immediately sent flying. Chapter 356. Asterisk bang. Asterisk Gray's clothes were torn to shreds as he flew backwards, crashing into the wall of the tunnel with a loud crash. However, this was not the end. Asterisk whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Asterisk another 3 earth elemental rocks whizzed over. One hit Gray, while the other 2 exploded near him. Instantly, The area where Gray was standing was covered in yellow dust. Gray. Elijah's expression was a little worried, as well as complicated. He thought highly of Gray's potential and felt that Gray was someone worth befriending. That was why he had taken the initiative to befriend him, but he did not expect such a turn of events. Just now, when faced with the earth elemental rocks, even he felt like he was walking on a tightrope. Naturally, he did not have the strength to help Gray. After being attacked by such powerful earth elemental rocks, if he was in Elijah's shoes, he would definitely die. After being attacked by 4 earth elemental rocks, I'm afraid the odds are against him. A genius who hasn't grown up is really nothing. Gray Fergus, to think that you would have such a day. Weren't you very arrogant when you were in Myoka region? The other barbaric blood warriors all had different expressions. Some were regretful, some were indifferent, and some were sneering. They saw great potential in Gray Fergus, but they did not expect him to die so easily. This is what happens when you make an enemy out of the Wallen family. The skinny old man from the Wallen family laughed proudly, his heart full of joy. This arrogant kid who made an enemy out of the Wallen family was finally dead. The next step was to exterminate the family he belonged to. Of course, before that, he had to take the magic weapon from him. He knew that the magic weapon in his opponent's hands was extremely powerful. If not for the narrow tunnel environment, he would not have been able to use its full power. Otherwise, he would not have been able to kill him so easily. However, at this moment, a cold voice suddenly rang out, causing him to stop in his tracks. What happens when you make an enemy out of the Wallen family? In the distance, where Gray was, the smoke and dust dispersed, revealing a figure. This was a ragged figure. His clothes were like the clothes of a beggar, or even worse than a beggar's clothes. His clothes were tattered, with only a few strips of cloth still wrapped around his body. This person was none other than Gray. At this moment, he did not even have the slightest injury on his body, let alone serious injuries. What was even stranger was that his skin was bronze in color. It was filled with a metallic texture. It was as if his entire body was cast from a mortal azurite. Not dead. He's not even injured. Elijah was pleasantly surprised. The other barbarian blood warriors were also surprised. If they were the ones being attacked by the earth elemental rocks, they would most likely die immediately. Even if they were lucky enough to survive, they would definitely be seriously injured and on the verge of death. However, not only was Chu Feng not dead, he was not even injured. This was simply inconceivable to them. What's with the bronze color on his skin? Is it a blood fiend's ability or a magical weapon's ability? Naturally, there were also people who noticed the abnormal bronze color of Gray's skin and guessed the origin of this metallization ability. How could you have the Sidney family's metallization ability? The skinny old man from the Wallen family said incoherently. Having dealt with the Sidney family for a long time, he naturally knew that this metallization was the usual method used by the Sidney family. However, he did not expect Chu Feng to be able to use it as well. Humph! Gray snorted coldly, his eyes flashing with coldness. He had originally planned to leave the Tomb of the Kings and find a secluded place to attack the Wallen family. However, the Wallen family elder's plot had made him decide to act in advance. The various traps in the Tomb of the Kings were extremely dangerous, and there was also an enemy eyeing him covetously, ready to ambush him at any time. This situation was extremely dangerous. If not for his metallization ability, he would have died just now. He could not allow this to continue, so he decided to act in advance to avoid becoming an enemy of the royal family. The best way was to cripple the other party and make them completely lose their threat. Now that the other party had taken the initiative to attack him, it was a very good opportunity. Even if he crippled the other party, the royal family would not blame him for it. After all, the other party had tried to kill him first. Bang! 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 Keeping his body metallized, Gray faced the incoming earth elemental rocks and charged forward without dodging. The earth elemental rocks constantly struck his body, but they were unable to leave the slightest wound on him. He paused for a moment before continuing to charge forward. In just a few moments, he broke through the blockade of the earth elemental rocks and passed through the tunnel that was dozens of meters long. Then he coldly looked at the skinny old man from the Wallen family, the coldness in his eyes seeming to be able to freeze people. Whoosh! A large number of ice and wind blades mixed together, filling the air with coldness. It was like the attack of the winter goddess, attacking the skinny old man from the Wallen family. Boom! The skinny old man from the Wallen family's flame, ice, and wind blades collided with each other, and then both of them were annihilated. Oof, you're actually not dead, but it doesn't matter. Let me personally send you to your death. After blocking Gray's attack, the skinny old man from the Wallen family, who was holding a powerful magic weapon, was not afraid at all. He coldly laughed. If the other party could fully display the power of the corpse-controlling magic weapon, in addition to the other party's current strength, the skinny old man would naturally be no match for him. But it was obvious that in such a tunnel, the other party would not be able to release a barbarian-level blood fiend. Even if he could, he would only be able to release a single barbarian-level blood fiend at most. He would not be able to display the full power of the magic weapon. Whoosh! Gray's eyes were cold. Without saying a word, he attacked the skinny old man from the Wallen family with a mixture of ice and wind blades. The tunnel had indeed restricted his ability to control corpses. This tunnel was rather spacious for a human, but it was too crowded for a barbaric-level blood fiend that was more than 5 meters tall, or even 7 meters tall. Giant beasts like the iron-armed barbarian ape would be stuck in the tunnel after being released, unable to move at all. The only thing that could be released was the brute force ant, which was the smallest of them all, with a body length of only 5 meters. Bang! The brute force ant appeared outside, and then like an armored vehicle, it quickly rushed toward the skinny old man from the Wallen family. It can actually release a barbarian-level blood fiend, but in this tunnel, it's just a live target, the skinny old man from the Wallen family sneered. With the size of the brute force ant, it was no different from a live target in a narrow space like this tunnel. Whoosh! With a slash of his blade, a red flame directly attacked the brute force ant. As expected, the gigantic brute force ant had no way of dodging. When the red flame hit its body, it was immediately engulfed in flames and sent flying backward. But what surprised him was that the red flame on the brute force ant's body was quickly extinguished, revealing a clear burn wound on its body. Its body was bronze in color, as if it was cast with black gold. What? The brute force ant can also metallize? There was a look of shock on his face. He had never thought that not only could Gray metallize, but also the barbarian-level blood fiend he controlled. Thump, thump, thump. The brute force ant was like an armored vehicle, crashing toward the skinny old man from the Wallen family. At the same time, Gray's combination of ice and wind blades attacked the skinny old man from the Wallen family, and at the same time, he also approached the old man from the Wallen family. Their power has surpassed an ordinary barbarian level. Seeing Gray and the skinny old man from the Wallen family, as well as the power they displayed, the people from the other families who had broken through the blockade of the earth elemental rocks retreated to the side and made way for them to avoid being treated as enemies by either side. The power that the two of them had displayed had surpassed that of an ordinary barbarian level, and they did not want to withstand that level of power. But they could not help but feel surprised. It was normal for the Wallen family to have such power. After all, the Wallen family was one of the top families in the Marquis family. But Gray Fergus also had such power, and they could not help but feel surprised. According to their understanding, the other party was only a member of Count's family, and yet he had such power and a powerful magic weapon. This was too shocking. I heard that he has a close relationship with the second princess, but after some of the barbarian blood warriors who thought they knew the truth explained, the others were enlightened. He was actually riding on the second princess's coattails. No wonder he had such power and a powerful magic weapon. Rumble, rumble. In the tunnel, the terrifying collision of the blood fiend's abilities rang out continuously. If the tunnel had not been reinforced by the Purple Thunder King's runes, it would have collapsed long ago. Damn it. Facing the joint attack of Gray and the brute force ant, the skinny old man from the Wallen family suddenly felt an immense pressure. Because of his nervousness, his forehead was already covered in cold sweat. If not for the narrow space of the tunnel, he would have been defeated. At this moment, he finally regretted attacking the other party, but it was obviously too late for regrets. Rumble. The skinny old man from the Wallen family's scarlet flames collided with Gray's frosty windblade. Both of them were annihilated, but they were unable to stop the brute force ant from approaching. Bang! He was directly hit by the brute force ant, and he was violently sent flying into the wall of the tunnel. Even though he was wearing combat armor with extremely high defense, he still could not help but feel an intense pain in his body, as if his bones had been shattered. Thump, thump, thump. The brute force ant continued to charge at him, and he hurriedly struggled to stand up. A scarlet flame slashed out, sending the brute force ant flying. If it was an ordinary barbarian-level blood fiend, it would have been dead by now. Even if it didn't die, it would have been severely injured and on the verge of death. However, this brute force ant was different from ordinary barbarian blood fiends. Its body could be metallized, and its defense was terrifyingly strong. Sure enough, the brute force ant crawled up once again and charged at him together with Gray. Although its body was covered with terrifying wounds, it did not collapse. Chapter 357. Thump, thump, thump. The brute force ant, whose entire body was covered in bronze, used its 6 legs to aggressively charge at the skinny elder of the Warren family. The brute force ant's huge body restricted its agility, but it also sealed off the space for the shriveled elder of the Whalen family to dodge. This made it very difficult for the shriveled elder to dodge the brute force ant's charge. Clang! The Wallen family elder's long saber was wrapped in crimson flames as he slashed at the brute force ant. The power of the saber and the crimson flames immediately sent the brute force ant flying, leaving a hideous wound on the brute force ant's body. However, at this moment, a greenish-white glacier suddenly appeared. Whoosh! Frost filled the air, and wind blades flickered with a sharp aura as they fused together to form a green-white river of ice. It was like a waterfall falling from the sky as it attacked the skinny elder of the Warren family. The Wallen family elder hurriedly slashed out a flame to meet the greenish-white glacier. The two collided not far from the skinny old man of the Whalen family, creating a huge collision sound like a tsunami. Then, both of them collapsed and sputtered out. Bang! The Wallen family elder was so close that he was immediately hit by the explosion shockwave and was sent flying. He landed heavily on the ground, his body covered in wounds. Some of them were cut by sharp blades, and dark red blood was flowing out of their wounds. Those were the injuries caused by the splashes of the wind blades. There were black, carbonized wounds on his body. Those were burns caused by the sputtering red sparks. His entire body was in pain, but the skinny old man of the Warren family forced himself to stand up. Whoosh! At this moment, Gray's expression was cold as he quickly closed in on him. His expression suddenly became flustered. He raised his weapon and prepared to slash at Gray. But just as he raised his weapon, a green wind blade slashed at his right hand with lightning speed. Puff! Blood splattered as his right hand flew high into the air, rolling and falling to the ground with a thud. My hand! The skinny old man of the Warren family roared in pain like a mad beast as he covered the wound on his hand, and the blood stained his other hand red. The excruciating pain of losing his hand caused him to break out in cold sweat. He had never experienced such excruciating pain in his entire life. However, he was a blood warrior who had experienced cruel battles. Not only had he been on the battlefield, but it had been more than once. Even in the midst of extreme pain, he had made the most correct choice. In just a moment, he had already reacted. He bent down and used his remaining left hand to quickly grab the magic weapon that had fallen to the ground. If they wanted to have a chance of survival, they couldn't afford to lose their magic weapons. Whoosh! At this moment, the magic weapon that had been motionless after falling to the ground suddenly moved. It flew up in extremely fast speed and finally landed in a hand. The owner of this hand was Gray. Just now, he had used his ability to control metal. If the magical weapon was in the hands of the other party, with the strength of the other party as a barbarian blood warrior, it would naturally be difficult for him to snatch the magical weapon from the other party's hands. However, Since the magical weapon had already left the other party's hands, it would naturally be extremely easy for him. You even know how to control metal? The Wallen family elder's face turned extremely pale when he saw the magic weapon that he had been relying on fall into Gray's hands. Not only did his opponent know how to metalize, he could even use the ability to control metal. If not for the fact that he knew that his opponent's blood magic was wind, he would have thought that his opponent practiced the same blood magic as the Sydney family. Now that he had lost his magic weapon and the thing that he had been relying on, he was definitely not a match for his opponent. Gray did not reply. He took the magic weapon in his hand and walked coldly towards his opponent. Although he was used to using a sword, it did not mean that he did not know how to use a knife. It was just that a sword was more convenient in his hands. You cannot kill me. I'm a noble of the kingdom. If you kill me, the royal family will definitely not let you off. Sensing the coldness in Gray's eyes and knowing that he was no match for him, the Wallen family elder staggered back and tried to put on a brave front. Then, he looked hopefully at the others and pleaded for help. Everyone, we are all nobles of the kingdom. Please lend a helping hand. The Wallen family will definitely repay you generously in the future. Unfortunately, no one responded to him. Of the two families that had the ability to save him, the Addison family had a look of disdain on their faces. They did not seem to have any intention of helping him. The Kenneth family looked on coldly from the sidelines and had no intention of helping either. As for the other families, they either did not have the ability or were afraid of the strength that Gray had displayed. Hence, they did not intend to help either. Moreover, the relationship between the nobles of the kingdom was more of a competitive one. Most of them were happy to see the Wallen family's strength being weakened. As for how the royal family would deal with this matter, it was not their business. The royal family would not punish them just because they were present. Don't worry, I won't kill you. I will only cut off your limbs and make you spend the rest of your life in bed, Gray said coldly. He walked over to where the old man from the Wallen family had been cut off. Crimson flames emanated from his long sword as he touched the severed hand. Immediately, the severed hand was covered in crimson flames and was quickly burned to ashes. After seeing that Edgar was able to reattach the severed hand, he naturally could not allow the other party's severed hand to remain intact. The royal family will not let you off. Seeing that Gray had burned the severed hand to ashes and did not give him a chance to reattach it, the old man from the Wallen family turned even paler. If his limbs were cut off and he had to spend the rest of his life in bed, he would rather die. Moreover, this was the depths of the Purple Thunder King's tomb. If he lost his hands and legs, he would not be able to leave this place alive. Asterisk Gray stepped forward, and the old man from the Wallen family retreated. He could not allow Edgar to cut off his limbs. Otherwise, it would be difficult for him to leave the tomb alive. Even if he could leave the tomb alive, it would be a fate worse than death. Asterisk crackle. Asterisk suddenly, a tyrannical sound of thunder rang out, attracting everyone's attention. 3 massive bolts of purple lightning suddenly appeared like wild dragons, pouncing down toward the old man from the Wallen family. The old man from the Wallen family had just retreated to the depths of the tomb, and he had inadvertently activated the runic mechanism in the depths of the tomb. At this moment, a cold smile appeared on Gray's lips as he looked at the old man from the Wallen family, as if he were a dead man. Forcing the old man from the Wallen family to retreat into the depths of the tomb and activate the runic mechanism, there was naturally Edgar's intention. He indeed could not kill the old man, or else the royal family would not let the matter rest. However, if the old man had activated the runic mechanism himself and been killed by the mechanism, it would have nothing to do with Edgar. The runic mechanism at the beginning was already extremely powerful, and the mechanism at the back would definitely be even more powerful. Now that the old man did not have a magic weapon, it was entirely possible to kill him. No, hearing the violent lightning behind him and seeing the sinister smile on Gray's face, the old man from the Wallen family understood that because he had been too nervous, he had been forced into the runic mechanism by Gray. He ran forward in fear, wanting to avoid the incoming lightning, but it was too late. Asterisk boom, boom, boom. Three bolts of purple lightning bombarded his body. The first bolt of lightning charred his entire body, and all the hair on his body disappeared. The second bolt of lightning struck him, and his body emitted a terrible burnt smell, and his skin was carbonized. The third bolt of lightning struck him, and his body was completely charred, and even his internal organs were carbonized. He was completely dead, and his body fell to the ground like a piece of rotten wood that had been burned by fire. It only had the appearance of a human, and if it had been someone who did not know the situation, they would have thought that it was just a piece of charred wood. Originally, I only wanted to cut off your limbs, but why did you have to take things so hard and commit suicide by charging into the runic mechanism? Gray said regretfully, causing the others to smile. If not for you forcing him, how could he have rashly stepped into the runic mechanism? Of course, such words could not be said, especially in such a situation. Once they were said, they would definitely become enemies. And with the other party's strength, other than the two Duke families, none of the other families had the confidence to win. This barbaric blood warrior of the Wallen family was too careless. He clearly knew that the runic mechanism in front of him was extremely dangerous, but he still ran into it without being fully prepared. Elijah joked. He naturally understood the meaning behind Gray's words. It was nothing more than him drawing a line between the death of this barbaric blood warrior of the Wallen family. With the potential that Gray had displayed, he naturally did not mind saying a few words. As for offending the Wallen family, that was impossible. The Wallen family would not dare to make things difficult for the Addison family. Indeed, the Wallen family was too careless. After all, this is the graveyard of kings. How could there be no deaths? Even a full HP warrior would die if he was not careful. Including him, there are already 4 barbaric blood warriors who have died in this graveyard of kings. With Elijah, a direct descendant of the Addison family, speaking up, some of the family members who had seen the potential that Gray had displayed and wanted to befriend Gray also spoke up. A barbaric blood warrior of the Orca family who had interacted with Gray before had cold sweat dripping down his back. He leaned against a corner where he would not be noticed, afraid that he would be targeted by Gray and follow in the footsteps of this barbaric blood warrior of the Wallen family. When I return, I must persuade the family head not to become enemies with this guy. The strength and potential that Gray had displayed had made him feel extremely apprehensive. Even now, he felt that even if the Orca family used all of their resources, it would still be very difficult for them to be a match for him. If they continued to be enemies with him, it would only bring disaster to the family. The biggest conflict that the Orca family had with him was only the death of a count. It was not worthwhile to throw the entire Orca family into this. Chapter 358. The Tomb of the King, the resting place of the king, was filled with traps. Each trap was more terrifying than the one before. Originally, 13 barbarian blood warriors had passed through the fire rune trap, but now, only 10 were left. One of them had been forced by Gray to trigger the lightning rune trap in the depths of the Tomb of the King and had died. The other 2 had not been able to withstand the earth elemental rock trap and had died. Every barbarian blood warrior was an existence that could summon the wind and summon the rain in the outside world. They were existences that could establish a powerful family, but here 3 of them had died. Including the barbarian blood warrior who had died in the rune trap outside the Tomb of the King, there were already 4 barbarian blood warriors who had died in this Tomb of the King. Moreover, this might not be the final number. After all, they had not reached the deepest chamber of the Tomb of the King, so it was unknown how many more people would die. What a powerful lightning rune trap. Looking at the skinny old man of the Wallen family who had been completely charred, the green-haired youth, Elijah's pupil shrank. The reason why the skinny old man of the Whalen family was killed by the lightning rune mechanism was because he was in a panic, but the most fundamental reason was that the rune mechanism was too powerful. It was even more powerful than the earth elemental rock. Should I retreat, or should I fight? The barbarian blood warrior of the Orca family had a conflicted expression. The temptation of the treasures in the Tomb of the King was naturally great, but the power of the rune trap he had encountered was extremely terrifying. He was a little conflicted, not knowing if he should decisively give up and retreat or fight. Pa pa pa. At this moment, a hint of determination flashed in the eyes of the barbarian blood warrior of the Cumberland family, and he walked towards the depths of the tomb of the king. In his hand, there was a yellow metal spear. The tip of the spear emitted an extremely powerful aura. There was no doubt that this was an extremely powerful magical weapon. However, he did not know if its power could be compared to the magical weapon that Gray had stolen from the Wallen family. Crackle. Just as he took a few steps forward, there was the sound of thunder. Then he saw a huge bolt of lightning that was completely purple and looked extremely demonic coming straight at him. At this time, the yellow spear in his hand changed. The entire spear emitted a hazy yellow light, revealing a vast aura. It was as if the spear in his hand was no longer a spear, but a work of art. Then, he raised his long spear and pierced it towards the purple lightning that was coming at him. Whoosh! A huge earthy yellow pillar of light appeared and pierced through the air, heading straight for the purple lightning. Boom! The khaki-colored light beam collided with the purple lightning. Terrifying ripples spread out from the point of collision. The khaki-colored light and the purple light seemed to fuse together, and then both of them were annihilated. A deafening explosion continued to spread. Although it's not as powerful as the Wallen family magic weapon, it should still be at the bronze level. Gray judged in his heart when he saw that the khaki light had successfully blocked the purple lightning. He blocked it. The others were also watching nervously. When they saw that the other party had blocked the purple lightning, they couldn't help but have a thought. Since the other party could block it, then they might have a chance as well. They were all thinking about the possibility of passing through this rune mechanism. Suddenly, crackle, another thunderous sound rang out, and another thick purple lightning appeared, heading straight for the Cumberland family's barbarian blood warrior. The purple lightning's generation speed is so fast. Everyone couldn't help but be shocked. The rune mechanism here was not only powerful, but the frequency of its attacks was also extremely fast. Rumble, rumble. Facing the purple lightning's extremely fast attack frequency, the Cumberland family's barbarian blood warrior instantly became strenuous. After blocking 5 consecutive purple lightning bolts, he finally lost his guard. Crackle. The purple lightning flashed with a demonic light and was filled with a destructive aura, crashing towards the Cumberland family's barbarian blood warrior. The Cumberland family's barbarian blood warrior only had time to emit a layer of earthy yellow light before he was hit by the lightning. Gotcha! Under the purple lightning, the earthy yellow light on the Cumberland family's barbarian blood warrior instantly shattered. The lightning continued on, crashing into the Cumberland family's barbarian blood warrior's body. Instantly, the Cumberland family's barbarian blood warrior's body was covered in purple lightning. His skin turned black, and the hair on his body started burning. His body trembled uncontrollably. Crackle. At this moment, another purple lightning formed, bringing along a destructive aura, and attacked him once again. Not good. The Cumberland family's barbarian blood warrior's expression changed. His body trembled as he retreated with great difficulty. When the lightning struck the ground, a deafening sound erupted, and the ground shook violently. Fortunately, he was only testing the power and didn't go too deep. Thus, he was able to escape the purple lightning's attack range. Ooh. After retreating from the purple lightning's attack range, the Cumberland family's barbarian blood warrior looked at the depths of the king's graveyard. His body was still numb, and his face was filled with shock. If he hadn't retreated in time, he would have died. Even so, the injuries on his body weren't light. He trembled as he took out a healing potion and swallowed it. After a while, he recovered. It's actually so powerful. Many barbarian blood warriors' expressions changed. Most of them already had difficulty passing through the earth elemental mechanism. Some of them were even injured. 2 of them even died under the earth elemental mechanism. The current lightning elemental mechanism was even more powerful than the earth elemental mechanism. If they continued to charge in, what awaited them might not be the king's treasure, but death. I withdraw. After consuming the healing potion, the Cumberland family's barbarian blood warrior finally recovered. He turned around without hesitation and walked out of the king's graveyard through the passage. After the previous attempt, he had deeply experienced the might of the lightning rune mechanism. Even if he had a powerful magic weapon, it would still be very difficult to charge through. Thus, he resolutely chose to give up. I also withdraw. The Orca family's barbarian blood warrior clenched his teeth and made his decision. In the end, there were 4 barbarian blood warriors who chose to withdraw. Without hesitation, they walked out of the king's graveyard. Other than Gray, the remaining 6 were a suspected desolate blood warrior and Elijah from the Addison family, a suspected desolate blood warrior and another barbarian blood warrior from the Kenneth family, and a barbarian blood warrior who didn't belong to the 3rd Duke and 7th Marquis family. Tap, tap, tap. The suspected desolate blood warrior from the Addison family had an aged face, but his gaze was extremely sharp. He didn't say anything and stepped into the lightning rune mechanism. Without hesitation, he walked into the depths of the king's graveyard. Terrifying purple lightning struck, but a blue lightning bolt struck out in front of him, immediately extinguishing the purple lightning. Boom, boom, boom. Purple lightning kept striking down, but it was all blocked by his blue lightning. It was obvious that he didn't seem to be straining against this level of purple lightning. He really is a desolate blood warrior. Gray's pupils shrank. Even a barbarian blood warrior who had completed a round of training would not be as relaxed as his opponent. His opponent's strength was definitely at the desolate rank. Be careful. Elijah called out to Gray and stepped into the depths of the king's graveyard. He held a 5-meter-long longsword in his hand. This was a pure black longsword. The body of the sword was black, and so was the hilt. The entire sword was like a black hole that swallowed all light, making it difficult for any light to escape. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. The purple lightning struck at him. Suddenly, countless shadow tentacles appeared under his feet, like a closed flower, enveloping the purple lightning and crushing it. Its power is not inferior to the Wallen family's magic weapon. It might even be stronger. As a direct descendant of the Addison family, Elijah had come to a dangerous place like the king's graveyard. Naturally, the Addison family would give him a life-saving method. Sure enough, his opponent had an extremely powerful magic weapon. On the other side, the 2 from the Kenneth family also rushed into the depths of the king's graveyard. They also used their own methods to block the lightning attacks. Among the 6 who had not retreated, only Gray and another barbarian blood warrior who did not belong to the 3rd Duke and 7th Marquis family remained. Whoosh! Gray glanced at the barbarian blood warrior. His body turned into metal, and he held the Wallen family's magic weapon. He stepped into the depths of the king's graveyard. The rune mechanism was activated, and a purple lightning struck down. He poured the power of blood into the magic weapon in his hand, and a red flame struck at the purple lightning. Puff! Under the red flame, the purple lightning was instantly shattered. He followed the 4 from the Addison family and the Kenneth family. Crackle! Purple lightning struck down continuously. Each strike had enough destructive power to kill a barbarian blood warrior, and the frequency of strikes was extremely fast. Suddenly, 2 thick bolts of purple lightning struck at Gray at the same time, as if they were 2 fingers of the purple giant. Gray's expression changed slightly. He used the combination of ice and wind blades. The green and white wind blades were like a waterfall falling from the sky, meeting the 2 purple lightning bolts head-on. Boom! The 2 collided, and a violent explosion occurred. Lightning, wind blades, and ice splattered everywhere. Many of them even hit Gray's body. Fortunately, Gray's body had turned into metal, and his body's defense was extremely strong, so he was able to withstand it. Gray and the 4 members of the Addison family and the Kenneth family finally broke through the area where the lightning rune mechanism was located and entered a large hall after blocking the lightning bolts that continuously struck them down. This is the tomb of the Purple Thunder King. In front of him was a huge palace-like space. It was extremely magnificent. The thick yellow stone pillars were engraved with beautiful patterns. The purple ceiling above him was carved with pictures of strange beasts. The white stone floor was so smooth that it could reflect one's shadow. In the center of the space, a purple stone coffin was quietly displayed. Chapter 359. This was an extremely large stone coffin. It was 10 meters long and 5 meters wide. It was carved out of purple stone, and its surface was covered with mysterious patterns. It looked like a coffin specially made for giants. It was quietly displayed in the center of the space and was the most eye-catching thing in the entire space. When people entered this space, they couldn't help but look at it. Just by standing at the entrance at least 50 meters away, one could already feel the pressure. Without a doubt, the one lying in the coffin was the Purple Thunder King. Gray looked away from the coffin with difficulty and looked at the other places in the space. His eyes couldn't help but become passionate. A small mountain of magic coins. On the left side of the space, there was a small mountain of black magic coins. That was a small mountain of magic coins. With such a volume, there were at least a few million of them. If converted to gold coins, it would be several 100 million gold coins. Several 100 million gold coins was an astronomical amount of wealth. In this world, the purchasing power of gold coins was very strong. An ordinary citizen might not be able to accumulate the wealth of a single gold coin, even if he worked hard for his entire life. One could imagine how huge the wealth of hundreds of millions of gold coins was. Rune materials piled up into a small mountain. On the right side of the space, there was also a small mountain. However, it was colorful and was made up of all kinds of precious rune materials. Although it didn't look as attractive as the small mountain of magic coins, its value was definitely not lower than the small mountain of magic coins. If Master Herman saw this pile of rune materials, he would probably go wild with joy. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. The 4 people from the Addison family and the Kenneth family, Gray, and the barbarian blood warriors who didn't belong to the 3 dukes and 7 marquis family who arrived after Gray, all rushed out. The 2 people from the Addison family rushed towards the rune materials. The 2 from the Kenneth family rushed towards the small mountain of magic coins. Gray also rushed towards the small mountain of magic coins, and the remaining barbarian blood warrior rushed towards the small mountain of rune materials. The pressure from the coffin made everyone feel as if a huge rock was falling on them. Fortunately, there was still some distance between them and the coffin. Moreover, the strength of the people present wasn't weak. The weakest of them was a barbarian blood warrior, so it wasn't to the extent that they couldn't move. Whoosh! Even under the suppression of a king's might, the speed of the 2 people from the Kenneth clan was still extremely fast. They easily left Gray in the dust, displaying a speed and power that far surpassed Gray's. If Gray's guess was correct, one of them was a desolate blood warrior, while the other was a barbaric blood warrior who had completed a round of cultivation. Even though Gray's battle prowess was not inferior to a barbarian blood warrior who had completed a round of training, his speed and strength were still inferior. After all, he had just become a barbarian blood warrior, and his speed and strength were still at the level of an ordinary barbarian. In the blink of an eye, the 2 men from the Kenneth family had already arrived at the Magic Coins Hill. They took out their spatial rune belts and began to collect the magic coins. It was visible to the naked eye that the size of the magic coins was shrinking. When Gray arrived, the size of the magic coins had shrunk by more than half, which made Gray's heart ache. He quickly activated the magic ring on his hand and began to collect magic coins. Of course, during the process, his body remained metallized, and he was constantly on guard against the 2 men from the Kenneth family. Even though the treasures in the graveyard of the kings were all ownerless items and would belong to whoever obtained them, there were very few people who would really think this way. Most people would kill others to snatch the treasures. He did not dare to guarantee that the 2 men from the Kenneth family would not kill him because he was collecting magic coins. Fortunately, he was not completely defenseless. His metallized body gave him a strong defense. Even a desolate blood warrior would find it difficult to kill him in one blow. In addition, the spatial teleportation ability of the purple ring allowed him to escape even if he was pursued by a desolate blood warrior. This was the biggest reason why he dared to come to the graveyard of the kings. In the end, even when all the magic coins were collected, the 2 men for the Kenneth family did not intend to attack Gray. They only glanced at Gray indifferently and ignored him. This made Gray sigh in relief. Even though he was confident that he could escape, he really did not want to go up against such a colossus. After all, the Kenneth family still had a king-level warrior in charge. This was an existence that was even more terrifying than the Duke Naim's family. I've collected about 500,000 magic coins. Gray estimated that he had collected about 500,000 magic coins, which was about 50 million gold coins. This was naturally an extremely large amount of wealth. It was dozens of times more than Gray's current wealth. It was said that one could get rich in the graveyard of the kings, and this was indeed true. Of course, compared to the two men from the Kenneth family, his harvest was undoubtedly much smaller. A conservative estimate was that the two men from the Kenneth family had obtained at least 3 million magic coins, which was about 300 million gold coins. This was probably the reason why the Kenneth family did not attack him. After all, they had taken the bulk of the loot, and Gray had only obtained a small part of it. When Gray and the two men from the Kenneth family had collected the small mountain of magic coins, the two men from the Addison family and the other Desolate Blood Warrior had also collected the small mountain of room materials without any conflict. After that, the six of them looked at the purple coffin in the middle of the space. Whoosh! Almost at the same time, the six of them pounced towards the purple coffin. Now, in the entire space, the most likely place that still had precious items was within this purple coffin. There might even be an extremely precious silver-grade magic weapon. As a king-level warrior, the Purple Thunder King's magic weapon was almost certainly of that grade. The pressure has become stronger. As they approached the coffin, the pressure from the coffin became stronger and stronger. At first, Gray and the others were still relatively relaxed. But towards the end, the six of them could only walk step by step towards the coffin. It was as if there was a mountain pressing down on his body. Moreover, the weight of this mountain increased with every step he took. Among the six of them, the ones who walked the easiest were naturally the Desolate Blood Warriors from the Addison family and the Kenneth family. The strength of a Desolate Blood Warrior allowed them to have a strong physique that far surpassed Gray and the others. Almost at the same time, the Desolate Blood Warriors from the Addison family and the Kenneth family arrived beside the purple coffin. Then, the two of them moved, wanting to open the lid of the purple coffin. Although the lid of the purple coffin was huge and weighed more than 10 tons, this weight was obviously nothing to them. But the moment the two of them touched the purple coffin, dark gold runes suddenly appeared on the surface of the purple coffin and even in the entire space. Then, two extremely condensed green wind blades suddenly appeared. The moment they appeared, they had a terrifying aura of sharpness. Like two divine weapons, they attacked the two of them. Even Gray and the others, who were not the target of the attack, could not help but feel a chill run down their spines, not to mention the two who were being attacked. The two of them paled, but they were Desolate Blood Warriors after all. At this critical moment, they remained calm and displayed their powerful reaction. The Desolate Blood Warrior from the Addison family was surrounded by lightning. The lightning crisscrossed on his body, forming an armor of lightning that protected him. The Desolate Blood Warrior from the Kenneth family had a wall of ice in front of him. The wall of ice was filled with cold air. It was highly compressed ice that had a terrifying defense that far surpassed normal ice. However, the power of the green wind blades was beyond imagination. Even with the full defense of the two Desolate Blood Warriors, they could not completely block them. Pu. The lightning armor shattered, and the compressed ice was cut in half. The Desolate Blood Warrior from the Addison family and the Desolate Blood Warrior from the Kenneth family flew backward at the same time. There was a clear wound on their bodies. Traces of blood seeped out and dripped onto the ground. As people whose strength was second only to king-level warriors, they were injured. Grandfather, Elder, seeing the two injured, Elijah and the Desolate Blood Warrior from the Kenneth family looked worried. Only when they confirmed that the two of them were not seriously injured did they let out a sigh of relief. However, the seriousness on their faces did not disappear. Its power is not inferior to the runic mechanism in the stone forest outside the graveyard. As for Gray and the other barbarian blood warrior, their expressions changed drastically. In this space, There were also runic mechanisms, and their power was definitely not inferior to the runic mechanisms set up in the stone forest. After all, even a desolate blood warrior had been injured. The only fortunate thing was that this runic mechanism seemed to only be activated by touching the purple coffin. The four of them who did not touch the coffin were not attacked by the runic mechanism. Otherwise, even if they did not die, they would be seriously injured. After all, that was a powerful attack that could injure a desolate blood warrior. So the reason for building such a huge space was to make it convenient to set up runic mechanisms. When he first entered the space, Gray felt that it was very strange. This space was too spacious. Rather than calling it a tomb, it was more like a palace. Now, he understood the reason. Setting up a runic mechanism required a large amount of space to bury the corresponding runic materials. The stronger the runic mechanism, the more space it required. The reason why the Crepe Myrtle King built such a huge tomb was to set up such a powerful runic mechanism. The most precious treasure in the graveyard of the king is so close, yet there is such a dangerous runic mechanism. Gray frowned and looked at the huge coffin. The huge coffin was 10 meters long and 5 meters wide. It was covered with mysterious patterns and looked extremely mysterious. There are words? Suddenly, Gray noticed that there was a small line of words on the surface of the coffin. As it was too small and their attention was focused on the inside of the coffin, the six of them did not notice it first. Only when they carefully looked at the coffin did they notice it. Gray carefully read the words on the coffin. Then, his expression changed abruptly. Regret, regret, regret to be born in a cage. Chapter 360. Regretful, regretful, regretful that I was born in a cage. It was only a sentence, but revealed an unparalleled unwillingness and sorrow. Looking at this line of words, Gray seemed to see a dying old man roaring at the sky, venting the anger and unwillingness in his heart. This was the tomb of the Purple Thunder King. The person who would write these words on his coffin was undoubtedly the Purple Thunder King, and it was very likely that he had written them not long before his death. Before his death, he seemed to be very unwilling to be born in a cage. What exactly was this cage referring to? Could it be referring to this world? There are words. Gray's unusual behavior attracted the attention of the others. Following Gray's gaze, the other 5 people also noticed this line of words. Seeing this line of words, the 5 people could not help but change their expressions. Among them, the 4 people from the Addison family and the Kenneth family had heavy astonishment on their faces. It seemed that this was not the first time they had heard such words, or rather, the content. A cage. I did not expect the Purple Thunder King to also say such words. After a moment, Elijah said with a complicated voice, "Also, who else said such words?" Gray hurriedly looked at Elijah and asked, 200 years ago, there was a king-level expert of the Addison family. In his later years, he wrote something similar in his notes. Elijah said in a deep voice, "Could it be that the cage refers to this world?" Gray asked the question in his heart. It should be. Although the notes did not say anything specific, from the words before and after, it is very likely that it refers to this world. Elijah nodded. Why is it said that this world is a cage? Could it be that this world is really too small for them? Gray raised his eyebrows. It should not be, but the notes did not record the exact reason. Elijah shook his head and looked at the 2 people from the Kenneth family. However, the Kenneth family should know more than us. After all, the Kenneth family has that lord. Gray's eyes lit up as he looked at the 2 men from the Kenneth family. Indeed, among those present, the Kenneth clan was the most likely to know the origin of the prison grounds. After all, there was still a king-level expert in the Kenneth clan. Furthermore, judging from the time, that king-level expert should be in his later years. His state of mind should be extremely similar to the Purple Thunder King's. I know a little, but not much. The Kenneth family's barbarian blood warrior was an old man who appeared to be around 60 years old. When he saw the gazes of the few people looking in his direction, he did not conceal anything and said. In fact, the term caged land only appeared during the era of kingdoms. During the era of empires, there was no such term. It only appeared in the era of kingdoms. There was no such thing in the era of empires. Could it be that the formation of the prison land is related to the fall of empires? The barbarian blood warrior who did not belong to the 3rd Duke and 7th Marquis family exclaimed. I don't know if it's related, but it's true that the term caged land only appeared after the fall of the empire. The Kenneth family's barbarian blood warrior shook his head. He then looked at the Kenneth family's desolate blood warrior and asked an old man who was older than him. Uncle, in the family, you have the most contact with the patriarch. Have you heard anything from the patriarch? The world has changed. The Kenneth family's desolate blood warrior said with a sigh. The world has changed? What does that mean? Gray looked at the Kenneth family's desolate blood warrior with a dumbfounded expression. Not only him, even the 2 people from the Addison family, the barbarian blood warriors who did not belong to the 3rd Duke and 7th Marquis family, and even the Kenneth family's barbarian blood warrior were looking at the Kenneth family's desolate blood warrior in astonishment. If we were to say that the world during the era of empires was suitable for the birth of experts, then the world now is no longer suitable for the birth of king-level experts. No longer suitable for the birth of experts. Everyone was shocked. They could not help but recall the description of the era of empires in the books that were excavated from the ruins of empires. Almost all of the related books mentioned that the empire during that era was very powerful. The number of experts was much more than what it was now. Not only were there many king-level experts, but there were also existences above the king level. Now, not to mention existences above the king level, even the number of king-level experts had become extremely scarce. There were only a handful of king-level experts in the entire Purple Moon Kingdom. There were less than 10 of them. It was imaginable how unsuitable the world was for the birth of experts. Isn't the reason why the number of experts can't be compared to the era of empires because of the lack of blood techniques? Elijah asked doubtfully. That's part of the reason, but it's definitely not the main reason. The Kenneth family's desolate blood warrior nodded and then shook his head. Let's not talk about those above the king level for now. In terms of king-level existences, the difference between the current 4 great kingdoms and the empires is too great. The main reason is that cultivation has become extremely difficult in this world. Uncle, what is the reason for the drastic changes in the world? Did the patriarch say anything? The wild blood warrior of the Kenneth family asked. The patriarch didn't say. However, he did say that if existences above the king level appear in this world, then they might be able to break the cage. Break the cage? How do we break it? Gray and the others were puzzled. The entire world had changed. Even if existences above the king level were to appear, how would they be able to break the cage? The patriarch didn't say. The wild blood warrior of the Kenneth family shook his head. He had interacted with the patriarch of the Kenneth family a lot, but that was only when compared to others. When one reached the level of a king-level expert, they would either be in seclusion or roaming some extremely dangerous forests in search of the materials they needed. They would rarely come into contact with the rest of the family. After listening to the explanation of the wild blood warrior of the Kenneth family about the cage, Gray and the others were silent for a long time. They digested the secrets they had heard. After a while, they came back to their senses and focused their attention on how to open the coffin. There's a powerful rune mechanism guarding it. How do we open the coffin? The cage was obviously a problem for king-level experts to think about. It did not have much to do with them. Other than Gray, the others might not even have to worry about it for the rest of their lives. After all, it was not easy to become a king-level expert. Other than Gray, who had the ability to transform, no one could be sure that they would become a king-level warrior in the future. Can we turn back and ask Master Herman to go over? Gray asked. It's very difficult. There are many mechanisms in the tomb. It would be difficult even for us to pass through, let alone bring Master Herman with us. Elijah frowned. Then should we ask Master Herman to break through all the mechanisms along the way? That would take too much time. There are many mechanisms in the tomb. It would take at least 1 or 2 months to break through all the mechanisms along the way. Neither Master Herman nor we have that time. The wild blood warrior of the Addison family shook his head. As one of the few wild blood warriors of the Addison family, he was originally stationed in an important or production area of the Addison family. This time, because of the importance of the king's tomb, he had taken the risk to come here. Naturally, he could not stay in the king's tomb for long. Moreover, the more time passes, the easier it is for unforeseen events to occur. If more factions come, the situation will become even more complicated. The wild blood warrior of the Kenneth family said. Although the Kenneth family and the Addison family were noble dukes, it did not mean that they did not have any competitors. For example, the Nahum family, the Lex family, where the king of mercenaries was from, and even the royal family. After all, even the royal family would be tempted by a silver-grade magic weapon. The more time passed, the easier it was for unforeseen events to occur. Therefore, there was no time to slowly break through the mechanisms in the tomb and open the coffin. Chapter 361. There's no need for our two families to hide anything. Against such a situation, the Kenneth family is indeed prepared. I believe the Addison family should be the same. Let's attack together. The desolate blood warrior of the Kenneth family looked at the desolate blood warrior of the Addison family and said, "That's true. Now is not the time to hide anything." The Addison family elder nodded, and a short sword suddenly appeared in his hand. It was a short sword about a foot long. It was purple in color, and its surface was covered with complicated rune patterns. The rune patterns on the short sword made for a very strange combination. It was called a magic weapon, but it had rune patterns unique to rune items. It was called a rune item, but it had the appearance of a magic weapon, and it did not have a slot for a magic crystal. At the same time, the desolate blood warrior of the Kenneth family took out something that looked like an arrow in his sleeve. It was ice blue, and both the arrow and the launcher were covered with rune patterns. What is this? Gray was shocked, seeing the solemn attitude of the desolate blood warriors of the Addison family and the Kenneth family. These two items seemed to be extremely precious. This is a forbidden weapon. Elijah explained. Forbidden weapon? Yes, this is a weapon that can only be refined by a king-level powerhouse. It is imbued with a king-level powerhouse's blood beast ability. It can display a destructive power comparable to a king-level powerhouse, but it can only be used once. It can unleash a destructive power comparable to a king's. Gray and the desolate blood warrior who did not belong to the 3rd Duke and 7th Marquis family were shocked. It was the first time the two of them had heard of such an item. It could actually unleash a strike comparable to a king's. It was an unimaginable killing weapon. Didn't this mean that a family that had once produced a king could unleash a destructive power comparable to a king's at any time if they wanted to? Thinking of this, the two of them felt their hearts palpitate. If this weapon could really unleash a strike comparable to a king's, they would definitely die under such a weapon. However, the two of them faintly felt that even a king's would not be able to easily refine such a terrifying item. As expected, Elijah's next words confirmed their suspicions. The forging of a forbidden tool requires extremely special forging materials. They are very difficult to find. Moreover, forging a forbidden artifact like this will place an enormous burden on the body of a king-level expert. As a result, even for clans like us that have produced king-level experts, there are extremely few forbidden artifacts in our possession. A pained expression appeared on Elijah's face. If it weren't for the fact that there was something extremely precious in the coffin, he wouldn't have taken out the forbidden weapon. After all, to the Addison clan, which no longer had a king-class expert, the forbidden weapon was one less they had. It actually puts a burden on the body of a king-level master. Gray and the barbarian blood warriors who did not belong to the 3rd Duke and 7th Marquis family heaved a sigh of relief. Even within the royal family, a king-class expert was definitely an extremely respected figure. It was impossible for them to risk harming the body of a king-class expert to forge a forbidden weapon. As a result, such a forbidden weapon should be extremely rare and would not be used unless it was under special circumstances. Fortunately, this was the case. Otherwise, if a king-class expert's family members appeared and each of them had a forbidden weapon, they would have no choice but to hide as far away as possible when they saw these family members. This was especially true for Gray. Now that he had an enemy family that had produced a king-class expert, if everyone in this family had a forbidden weapon, it would be a disaster for him. Back off a little. The desolate blood warriors of the Addison clan and the Kenneth clan were already prepared to attack. The two of them continuously retreated until they reached the entrance of the room, where they stopped. The desolate blood warrior of the Addison clan poured his blood energy into the purple short sword in his hand. Then, the purple short sword in his hand seemed to have a life of its own as it flew out of his hand. The purple short sword that flew out of his hand suddenly flashed with purple lightning. The surroundings turned into a sea of purple lightning that surged towards the purple coffin in the middle of the hall. The desolate blood warrior of the Kenneth clan shot the arrow in his hand towards the purple coffin. A white arrow less than 3 inches long was shot out, and a dense white chill suddenly erupted. A huge cone-shaped iceberg appeared, and also crashed towards the purple coffin. Rumble. The sea of purple lightning and the huge cone-shaped iceberg crashed into the purple coffin at almost the same time, creating a sound that sounded like a landslide or a tsunami. Wong. Golden patterns appeared on the purple coffin and the entire hall. Green wind blades appeared one after another, attacking the sea of purple lightning and the huge cone-shaped iceberg. However, when they crashed into the sea of lightning and the huge cone-shaped iceberg, they were like stones that had sunk into the sea. They possessed unimaginable destructive power. The green wind blades that were enough to injure a desolate blood warrior dissipated the moment they came into contact with the two. Under the violent collision between the sea of purple lightning and the cone-shaped iceberg, the golden patterns on the purple coffin and the entire hall flickered continuously. They continuously attacked the sea of purple lightning and the cone-shaped iceberg with green wind blades. The green wind blades were defeated. The sea of purple lightning and the cone-shaped iceberg were also slowly shrinking. The three of them were in a stalemate. Kaka. After the golden rune patterns flickered 10 times, cracks of various sizes began to appear on the surface of the golden patterns. Then, suddenly, all of the golden patterns dimmed. The power of the sea of purple lightning and the cone-shaped iceberg that had shrunk several times in size completely exploded on the purple coffin. Rumble. A terrifying explosion. The purple coffin exploded. The purple stone materials and even the contents of the coffin flew everywhere. Large chunks of purple stones, each with unimaginable destructive power, sputtered in all directions. Among the sputtering purple stones, there was something very eye-catching. A purple spear with beautiful patterns on the body of the spear shot out, like purple lightning. A dagger that was the color of ice shot out, as if it was a weapon made of ice. A book that looked like it was made of leather that was not damaged by the explosion and also shot out. Purple lightning spear. It's the purple lightning spear. Seeing the purple spear, the 4 people from the Addison family and the Kenneth family couldn't help but cry out in surprise. As they were from the Duke family, they knew more about the Purple Lightning King than Gray and the others. They knew that the Purple Lightning King had a silver-grade weapon, the Purple Lightning Spear. At this moment, they immediately determined that this spear was the silver-grade weapon, the Purple Lightning Spear. Without any hesitation, the desolate blood warriors of the Addison family and the Kenneth family all rushed over. The most precious item in the entire coffin was undoubtedly this silver-grade weapon. Almost at the same time, 2 people rushed to the front of the Purple Lightning Spear. One of them grabbed the front end of the spear, while the other grabbed the end of the spear. Kiki. The Purple Lightning Spear trembled. Both of them wanted to snatch the Purple Lightning Spear from each other's hands. However, they were evenly matched. Neither of them could break free from the other's hands. Bang! 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 The remaining hand quickly clashed with each other, causing violent collisions. Every sound was like a thunderclap. They didn't hold back at all. There was no sign of the harmony that they had when they worked together to break the runic mechanism. Facing the temptation of a silver-grade magic weapon, not to mention 2 families, even if they were blood brothers, they might turn against each other at this moment. Whoosh! Whoosh! On the other side, Elijah and the Kenneth family's desolate blood warrior rushed towards the dagger that seemed to be polished by ice. Pooh! The dagger was deeply embedded into a stone pillar. The Kenneth family's desolate blood warrior was even faster. He was about to reach out and grab the dagger. Just at this moment, more than 10 large shadow tentacles suddenly attacked him. He could only dodge. At this moment, one of the shadow tentacles wrapped around the dagger and pulled it out. It wrapped around the dagger and threw it towards Elijah. Gotcha! The Kenneth family's desolate blood warrior had already recovered. Countless amounts of cold air gushed out. The two tentacles were instantly frozen into ice sculptures and shattered. Clang! The dagger fell to the ground. Elijah and the Kenneth family's desolate blood warrior fought crazily with the dagger as the center. Whoosh! Gray pounced towards the book that wasn't damaged in the explosion. Although the silver-grayed purple thunder spear was tempting, it wasn't something that he could snatch with brute force. With the desolate blood warriors of the Addison family and the Kenneth family, it was almost impossible for him to snatch it. As for the dagger that seemed to be polished by ice, although it looked extraordinary and its grade wouldn't be low, it wasn't something that he urgently needed now. Instead, it was the book that wasn't damaged in the explosion that attracted him the most. His main purpose in coming to the king's graveyard this time was to obtain the blood technique that the Purple Thunder King had once cultivated and convert it into a blood technique. The conversion of blood technique might be difficult for others, but to him, it wasn't too difficult. This book wasn't damaged in the explosion, so it must be an extremely precious book. It was highly possible that it was the blood technique book that the Purple Thunder King had cultivated. After all, if it was an ordinary book, it wouldn't be written with such a durable material. Not good. Like him, the other desolate blood warrior that didn't belong to the 3rd Duke and 7th Marquis family also pounced towards the book. When he pounced towards the book, he displayed a speed that was even faster than Gray's. Soon, the book would fall into his hands. Gray hurriedly attacked the barbarian blood warrior. This was an old man with many age spots on his face. He should be quite old. Whoosh! Holding the saber that he had snatched from the Wallen family, Gray poured his blood power into it and slashed out. Immediately, a red flame attacked the old man with age spots on his face. The old man with age spots on his face was stopped in his tracks. Suddenly, a large amount of water appeared in front of him and turned into a high-pressure water saber that attacked the red flame. Chi-chi! The two collided and released a terrifying shockwave. Terrifying heat instantly spread in all directions. Chapter 362. Swish! Although the old man with age spots all over his face looked very old, when he fought, he gave Gray a great deal of pressure. After a water blade extinguished Gray's scarlet flames, another water blade slashed out, shattering the air as it headed straight for Gray. Whoosh! Gray had no choice but to be cautious. He used his ability to combine ice and wind blades, and a green river appeared. It met the water blade head-on. Pooh! After colliding with the green river, the water blade was like a real blade, constantly shattering the ice and wind blades. The ice and wind blades were like a huge millstone, constantly whittling away the power of the water blade. In the end, both sides were defeated. A barbarian blood warrior who has completed a round of training. Gray's gaze turned serious. He did not know what kind of family the old man with age spots came from. He was actually a barbarian blood warrior who had completed a round of training. Even the Wallen family did not have such an existence. From this point, it was not hard to see that the old man's family was not simple. Although the 3 Duke and 7 Marquis clans represented the strongest fighting force in the kingdom, it didn't mean that there were no other clans that could contend with these 10 clans apart from the 3 Duke and 7 Marquis clans. The Hobbs family, where the king of mercenaries was from, was one of them. The current Gray could also be considered as one of them. The family that the old man with age spots came from was definitely one of them. His battle strength is comparable to a barbarian blood warrior who has completed a round of training. The old man with age spots had a cautious look in his eyes. Judging from his speed, the other party should be a barbarian blood warrior who had just become a barbarian blood warrior. But in terms of battle strength, with the ability to combine blood beasts, the other party surpassed a normal barbarian blood warrior. He was comparable to a barbarian blood warrior who had completed a round of training. Moreover, He had seen the battle between the other party and the Wallen family's barbarian blood warrior. Other than having a battle strength comparable to a barbarian blood warrior who had completed a round of training, the other party's metallized body's defense was also extremely strong. It even surpassed that of a barbarian blood warrior who had completed a round of training. Moreover, the other party had a magical weapon that could control blood beasts. He could control a barbarian blood beast whose body was metallized and had a strong defense. Boom! Sure enough, there was a tremor, and he saw a barbarian-level blood beast appear. It was the barbarian-level blood beast, the barbarian ant, that the other party had used in the battle against the Wallen family's barbarian blood warriors. Although his body was already covered with terrifying wounds, he did not dare to underestimate them. Every single one of those wounds was caused by an attack that was comparable to a barbarian blood warrior who had completed a round of training. Even after receiving so many attacks, he still had the ability to move. From this, one could see how difficult it was to deal with him. However, what happened after that caused his expression to change from one of caution to one of extreme seriousness. Dong, dong, dong. After the barbarian ant, 3 more sounds rang out in succession. Then, 3 more huge creatures appeared. One of them was a 7-meter-tall humanoid beast. It was a huge black beast the size of a small mountain. It was a giant beast with 2 huge scythes. Each of the 3 giant beasts did not look simple. They were definitely at the berserker level. Moreover, when the 3 giant beasts appeared, their bodies also changed, just like the brute ant. They were now covered in a layer of bronze. Dong, 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 dong. The 4 bronze-colored berserker-level blood beasts were like 4 moving bronze hills as they charged towards the old man whose face was full of age spots. The tomb was very spacious. The restriction on his ability to control corpses had been completely lifted. Now, Gray could be considered to be in his most comprehensive state. Whoosh! At the same time, a long green river seemed to come from the horizon. It arrived first and attacked the old man whose face was full of age spots. Whoosh! The old man's face was full of age spots. He faced the green river with a water blade and slashed at the 4 berserker-level blood beasts with a sword in his hand. Buzz! A sharp buzzing sound came from his sword. This was a demonic weapon that could attack using sound waves. The water blade and the long green river collided and destroyed each other. As for the 4 barbarian-level blood beasts, they looked as if they had been hit by an invisible giant hammer. Although there were no wounds on their bodies, their forward momentum had been stopped. He quickly pounced on the book that had fallen to the ground. Facing Gray, who was now at full power, he knew very well that he didn't have much of a chance of winning. His only advantage now was that he was faster than Gray. He wanted to use his speed to snatch the book first and then immediately escape. Buzz! At this moment, a sharp sound rang out, and an invisible shockwave appeared, rushing straight at him. Bang! It appeared too suddenly, and he could not dodge in time. He was hit by the invisible shockwave directly. His body retreated rapidly, and wounds appeared on the surface of his body. Although the wounds were not serious, he was indeed injured. This was the special blood beast ability of the tusked boar. Although its power was much weaker than the sound shockwave he used just now, it was enough to stop him. His forward momentum was blocked. Whoosh! Relying on the tusked boar's blood beast ability, Gray blocked the old man whose face was full of age spots and forced him to retreat. He quickly rushed towards the book. Whoosh! A huge water blade appeared. The old man who was forced to retreat was unwilling to let Gray get the book. He used his blood beast ability to attack Gray, hoping to stop Gray in this way. However, Gray had no intention of retreating in the face of the water blade. An iron-armed barbarian ape appeared beside him and hammered the water blade with its millstone-sized fist. The blood beast ability of a berserker who had completed a round of training was naturally very powerful. Without exception, the iron-armed barbarian ape was sent flying by the water blade. However, Gray did not only have 1 berserker-level blood beast. 3 other berserker-level blood beasts appeared and surrounded the old man whose face was full of age spots. The tusk boar also attacked with another sound shockwave. This kind of shockwave was invisible and was the hardest to guard against. Not good. The old man, whose face was full of age spots, became anxious. He continuously slashed with the water blade and the demonic sword in his hand, forcing the 4 berserker-level blood beasts to retreat again and again. However, he was unable to severely injure the 4 berserker-level blood beasts. After the 4 berserker-level blood beasts got up, they continued to attack him and entangle him. He had no time to attack Gray. Whoosh! Taking advantage of this time, Gray finally rushed to the side of the book and picked it up. Without even looking at what was written inside, he directly stuffed it into the space of the purple ring. Whoosh! Seeing that the book was taken by Gray, the old man, whose face was full of age spots, knew that there was no hope for him to fight for it. He rushed out of the tomb without hesitation and disappeared into the tunnel. Although he was unable to obtain the blood technique book that was suspected to have been cultivated by the Purple Thunder King, he had obtained a large amount of precious items. Even for his family, it was an extremely large amount of wealth. Therefore, he chose to retreat without hesitation. After summoning the 4 berserker-level blood beasts in front of him, Gray looked at the other 2 places where they were fighting. The desolate blood warriors of the Addison family and the desolate blood warriors of the Kenneth family were still fighting around the Purple Thunder Spear. The battle between the 2 was several times more terrifying than the battle between Gray and the old man, whose face was covered in age spots. Fortunately, this tomb was built with extremely special materials, so it did not collapse under the attacks of the 2. Elijah was still fighting with the desolate blood warriors of the Kenneth family for the demonic dagger that seemed to have been polished by ice. After taking a look around the hall, Gray saw that there was nothing else in the coffin other than the Purple Thunder King's corpse that was still emitting a powerful aura. He immediately teleported away. After seeing the forbidden weapon, and knowing that a family that had once produced a king-level master actually had such an item, Gray did not have any intention of joining the fight between the 2 parties. The Nahum family was already a headache for him among the Duke families that he had offended. He did not want to offend another 1 or 2 of them. The reason why he chose to teleport away immediately was because he was afraid that the 2 Duke families would have designs on the book that he had obtained. Disregarding the Addison family that was somewhat related to him, if the Kenneth family were to free up their hands, there was an extremely high possibility that they would try to snatch the book from him. Furthermore, although he knew the 2 direct descendants of the Addison family, their relationship was only slightly better than that of strangers. He did not rule out the possibility that the Addison family would try to snatch the book from him. Therefore, the best choice was to retreat immediately and not let the 2 families have the opportunity to snatch the book from him. This way, he would not offend the 2 families and would not lose the book that was very likely to be the Bloodspell book. Whoosh! When Gray reappeared, he had already left the king's tomb and the area where the tomb was located. He appeared in a place that was surrounded by yellow sand. It was naturally extremely difficult to imprint a teleportation formation pattern in the yellow sand. After all, once there was a gust of wind, the yellow sand would move and the formation pattern would naturally be destroyed. However, before entering the desert, Gray had already considered this problem. He had imprinted formation patterns on some large flat rocks and stored them in the purple ring. After arriving in the desert, he found an opportunity to bury them in the desert. Gray was not in a hurry to leave the desert. He took out the book that he had obtained from the purple ring and looked at the front of the book. The Thunder Lizard Sequence Blood Spell. It really is a blood spell book. Just as he had guessed, this book was indeed a blood spell book. Moreover, looking at the thickness of this book, it could probably be cultivated to an extremely high level. Gray flipped open the book and skimmed through it. Sure enough, he saw various levels of blood spell cultivation, from the murderous level to the king level. There were blood spells of every level. There are even blood spells above the king level. After the king level, there were still records on the pages of the book. Gray flipped to the back and immediately discovered that this was a blood spell above the king level. However, since this is a blood spell that the Purple Thunder King once cultivated, it is only natural that there would be a blood spell above the king level. Thinking about it carefully, the Purple Thunder King had lived for more than 400 years. It was very likely that he was a powerful king-level powerhouse who had completed 3 evolutions. It was certain that he had mastered a blood spell above the king level. Magic light level. This is the level above the king level. Chapter 363. Magic light level. So this is the level above king level. Although Gray knew that there were levels above king level, he did not know what they were. Now, he finally knew. Magic light is like the descent of the devil, the light of darkness shrouding the world. In ancient times, humans did not know how to cultivate. Their bodies were weak, and their combat power was not even comparable to ordinary blood fiends. They often became food for the blood fiends. That was a gloomy and hopeless period of history. Some talented individuals studied the blood fiends' bloodlines and found ways to strengthen themselves. In the end, they created a blood technique to implant blood fiends' bloodlines. This was the origin of the current blood techniques. As blood techniques were derived from blood fiends, the corresponding level of a blood warrior was usually evolved from the blood fiends level. Magic light level should be the level above king level blood fiends. This probably represented the extent of humans' fear of blood fiends. A king level blood fiend was enough to destroy a city and cause tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of casualties. What kind of destructive power would a blood fiend with a combat power that far exceeded king level possess? The threat of human extinction was probably nothing more than this. To the ancient people who did not know how to cultivate, it was like the descent of the devil. There was no hope of survival. This was probably the origin of the name Magic Light. Gray shifted his attention away from the Magic Light level blood technique and looked at the Desolate level blood technique. This was the blood technique he needed now. As for the Magic Light level, it was still too far away for him. After all, he was not even a Desolate blood warrior. There was still a long way to go. I need to implant the blood of the Thunder Draconic Beast. Gray raised his eyebrows. The blood fiend, corresponding to the Desolate level blood technique, was a type of blood fiend called the Thunder Draconic Beast. In other words, in order to cultivate this blood technique, one had to obtain the blood essence of this blood fiend and consume it with the corresponding medicine. Of course, with his metamorphosis ability, he only needed the blood of the corresponding blood fiend to implant the bloodline of this blood fiend. Even so, it was not easy to obtain. Even in the auction house, it was rare to see Desolate level blood fiends being auctioned. After all, Desolate level blood fiends were second only to king level blood fiends. In the entire Purple Moon Kingdom, there were not many forces that had the ability to kill such a blood fiend. As for himself, even though his current combat abilities were rather strong among those in the Berserker realm, it was still impossible for him to challenge a wild level blood beast. The difference between the Berserker realm and wild level blood beasts was just too great. Even if he had the abilities of a hybrid blood beast, it was almost impossible for him to challenge a wild level blood beast. Perhaps it was possible to combine the ice and wind blade abilities with a blood beast ability and upgrade it to a triple elemental ability. However, Gray was unable to find out what kind of blood beast blood he would need to consume to produce a triple elemental ability. Looks like I can only try my luck at Mercenary City. Right now, the only way he could obtain it was through the Hobbs Chamber of Commerce in Mercenary City. He wanted to see if he could get the Thunder Dragon beast blood there. Unknowingly, Gray had finished flipping through the Desolate level blood technique and reached the corresponding page of the King level blood technique. His gaze swept across the page, and when it landed on a word on the page, he was suddenly stunned. Thunder Dragon. The corresponding blood fiend for this King level blood technique is actually a Thunder Dragon. Gray was surprised. The corresponding King level blood fiend for this blood technique book was coincidentally the blood of a Thunder Dragon that he had auctioned off previously. I wonder if I can use the Thunder Dragon Beast blood as a replacement. The Thunder Dragon Beast was a blood fiend with a higher bloodline than the Thunder Dragon Beast. Not only did its bloodline contain the Thunder Dragon Beast bloodline, but it was also evolved from the foundation of the Thunder Dragon Beast bloodline, making it even more powerful. Logically speaking, he could use the Thunder Dragon Beast bloodline to replace the Thunder Dragon Beast bloodline and cultivate the Thunder Dragon Beast blood technique. He might even be able to cultivate a king-level blood technique directly. After putting the blood technique book aside, Gray began to look at his other gains. They were worth about 30 million magic coins. There were bits and pieces of precious rune materials that could be used to draw rune items. They should be worth a few million magic coins. When Gray saw something, he couldn't help but be stunned. It was a crossbow arrow and 3 crossbow arrows. Regardless of whether it was the crossbow arrow or the crossbow arrow, they were all covered in rune patterns. However, there were no slots for magic crystals. Although there were rune patterns, it wasn't a rune item. Could this be a forbidden weapon? Gray's eyes widened, and his mouth felt a little dry. He felt as if a pie had fallen from the sky and hit him. No matter how he looked at it, this set of crossbow arrows was extremely similar to the forbidden weapon of the Kenneth family. It was just that one of them was a larger crossbow arrow, while the other was a smaller sleeve arrow. There are a total of 3 arrows, which means that it could be used 3 times. Should I test it? Gray had the urge to test it to see if this crossbow arrow was a forbidden weapon, but in the end he resisted the urge. It was suspected to be a king-level forbidden weapon. If he used it just like that, it would be too much of a pity. Even if he had 3 arrows that could be used 3 times, he definitely couldn't waste it so easily. I'm afraid the Wallen family won't take this lying down. Gray thought of the most suitable place to use it. The Wallen family's savage blood warrior had been forced by Gray to die under the rune mechanism. Although the royal family probably wouldn't pursue the matter, the Wallen family definitely wouldn't let it go so easily. If nothing unexpected happened, the enraged Wallen family would definitely drive the rune puppet to attack the Fergus family. Even with Gray's current battle strength, a rune puppet that was comparable to a savage blood warrior would be a bit of a headache. If the rune puppet really attacked, he could only take the Fergus family and temporarily avoid it. Now that he had obtained this suspected forbidden weapon, he wanted to test whether it was a forbidden weapon. The best test subject was undoubtedly the Wallen family's rune puppet that had the strength of a savage blood warrior. The Wallen family. Gray's lips curled into a cold smile. The Wallen family hated him greatly because of the savage blood warrior, but his hatred for the Wallen family was no less than the Wallen family's. This time, if not for his body being able to metallize and having an extremely strong defense, he might have already died under the earth elemental rock mechanism. Although the main culprit was already dead, what was certain was that ambushing him in the tomb of the king was definitely the decision of the entire Wallen family. He wouldn't let the Wallen family off so easily. Before me, for savage blood warriors had already left the tomb. The Wallen family should have already received news of the savage blood warrior's death and fled. If the Wallen family hadn't received the news and fled, he didn't mind following the Wallen family and then exterminating the rest of the Wallen family in the desert. Previously, because of the threat of the rune puppet, he didn't want to fight to the death with the Wallen family. But now, the Wallen family had lost a savage blood warrior. The Wallen family would definitely go crazy with anger after receiving the news, and they would drive the rune puppet to attack the Fergus family. Then, he wouldn't have so many considerations. I'm not in a hurry to rush to the Wallen family. Let's first consume the lightning dragon's blood and practice the desolate level blood technique. Using what was suspected to be a forbidden weapon to attack the Wallen family's rune puppet wasn't the top priority. The top priority now was to consume the lightning dragon's blood as quickly as possible and obtain the bloodline of the lightning dragon, officially beginning to practice the blood technique. Due to the second metamorphosis, his strength was increasing rapidly every day, even if he did not cultivate the blood technique. However, it was clear that only by combining the blood technique and the second metamorphosis would his strength be able to increase at a faster rate. Finding a place with his back against a sand dune where he couldn't be easily detected, Gray set up his tent and took out a crystal bottle. Within the transparent crystal bottle, one could see a volume of bright red blood. It was slightly swaying and had a viscous texture, like a semi-liquid jelly. This was the blood of a king-level blood beast, the lightning dragon. Gulp! Unscrewing the cork of the crystal bottle, Gray swallowed the lightning dragon's blood in one gulp. Squeak, squeak. As the blood entered his stomach, a numb feeling immediately appeared and quickly spread throughout Gray's body. He felt as if he had been struck by lightning, and his entire body was numb, unable to move at all. No, this wasn't a feeling, but a reality. Crackle. On the surface of Gray's body, there was actually quite a bit of purple lightning roaming about. His hair was standing straight up, giving him a very unconventional appearance. In addition, there was also a faint burnt smell coming from him. His entire body was now surrounded by lightning, and he looked extremely frightening. Purple lightning was swimming around his body, as if forming a lightning cocoon and wrapping him within. He was like a silkworm in a cocoon. A terrifying numbness spread throughout his body, and he couldn't move at all. He couldn't even move a finger. Whoosh! Under the terrifying lightning, the tent suddenly burst into flames and finally turned into a raging fire. Not only was he surrounded by lightning, but he was also being roasted by flames. Fortunately, it was just an extremely ordinary flame. With his current powerful physique, it was impossible for it to cause too much damage to him. Otherwise, he might have died in the most aggrieved manner as a barbarian blood warrior. He would not have been killed by the enemy, but by the fire caused by his own blood beast ability. The tent had been completely burned to ashes. He lay on the yellow sand, and the wind blew at his face from time to time. After a long time, he finally felt that he could move his fingers slightly. He struggled to move his fingers and tried to control his body. Finally, after a few minutes, he stood up shakily. It can actually trigger real lightning. Gray shook his head helplessly. He never expected that after swallowing the lightning dragon's blood, it would trigger real lightning. Not only did it burn down the tent, but it also put him in danger and almost roasted him. I've obtained the lightning dragon's bloodline. I wonder if I can form a hybrid blood beast ability, and if I can cultivate a desolate level blood technique. Chapter 364. Crackle, crackle. Gray raised one hand in the air. Suddenly, a large amount of purple lightning gathered in his hand and turned into a gigantic purple lightning bolt that was more than 10 meters long. It emitted a terrifying aura that was suffocating. Whoosh! The gigantic purple lightning bolt struck out like a purple light and struck a sand dune in the distance. Boom! The gigantic sand dune was flattened in the blink of an eye. Sand and gravel flew everywhere like a surging river. Gray retreated a few dozen meters to avoid the yellow sand that surged towards him like a river. He was not too surprised by such destructive power. It was only at the unique level of the barbarian level. It was only slightly better than nothing in terms of the increase in his combat strength. The only advantage was that this ability had a natural restraining effect on ghosts. If he encountered ghosts in the future, even if he did not have magic weapons like lightning or flames, he did not have to worry about not having the means to restrain them. He carefully sensed the various abilities in his body. He wanted to see if the lightning ability had mixed with the other abilities in his body to form an even more powerful blood fiend ability. Soon, the corners of his mouth curled into a smile. It actually merged to form such an ability. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Large amounts of black metal powder floated up from the yellow sand and eventually turned into sharp metal blades that floated around Gray. Crackle, crackle. The next moment, the surface of all the metal blades was suddenly entwined with strands of purple lightning, emitting an even more dangerous aura. It made the metal blade, which was already emitting an extremely sharp aura, even more dangerous. Then, all of the metal blades gathered together and turned into an enormous snake that shot forth to attack Chufone. Boom, boom, boom. After destroying several sand dunes, the long snake's lightning disappeared and the metal blades turned back into powder, completely dispersing. The combination of lightning ability and metal ability. This was the second hybrid ability that Gray had obtained. Without a doubt, the ability to manipulate metal with lightning was much more powerful than pure lightning or metal manipulation. It's a pity that I didn't manage to combine the three elements. However, I was able to combine the lightning and metal elements, which would greatly enhance my combat strength. What Gray wanted the most was naturally a hybrid ability formed from the three types of blood fiends. If he could do so, Gray would be able to fight above his level and possess strength comparable to a desolate blood warrior. However, The mixed ability formed from the three types of blood fiends was obviously not something that could be casually formed by swallowing the blood of blood fiends. There must be a certain mixing rule that Gray did not know about at the moment. Fortunately, although it did not form a three-elemental hybrid ability, it unexpectedly formed a two-elemental hybrid ability of lightning and metal. Whether it was the lightning ability or the ability to manipulate metal, they were all extremely destructive abilities. Naturally, the destructive power of these abilities was also extremely strong. In terms of destructive power, the lightning metal ability was even more powerful than the ice wind blade ability. The two mixed abilities have different inclinations. This did not mean that the ice wind blade ability was inferior to the lightning metal ability. Apart from having destructive power, the ice wind blade also had the ability to freeze. It could bind and delay the enemy, and was also an extremely powerful ability. It could only be said that the two abilities had different inclinations. The lightning metal ability was inclined towards pure destruction, while the ice wind blade ability was not only destructive, it also had the effect of binding the enemy. First using the ice wind blade to bind the enemy, then using the more destructive lightning metal ability to attack the bound enemy would definitely increase Gray's combat strength by a large margin. After confirming that there were no other changes in his body, Gray began to rush towards the Wallen family while attempting to cultivate the blood technique. Although he could stay in the Fergus family and wait for the Wallen family to come knocking on his door, that would definitely cause serious damage to the Fergus territory. With the destructive power of the Desolate Grade weapon and the suspected forbidden weapon in his hand, a single mishap could cause the entire town to disappear. Therefore, Gray decided to block the door and choose the location of the battle to be the Wallen family territory. This way, even if it was destroyed, it would be the Wallen family territory and not the Fergus family territory. A week later, Gray had already entered the Wallen family territory. He had no intention of concealing himself and traveled along the trade route without the slightest fear of being discovered by the Wallen family. Or rather, his goal was to be discovered by the Wallen family. The reason he had come to the Warren family this time was not to launch a sneak attack on the Warren family. Instead, he was prepared to directly clash with the Warren family and then use the weapon that he suspected to be a forbidden weapon to destroy the Warren family's rune puppets and eliminate this threat. After setting up a tent on a trade route and eating dinner, Gray began to cultivate the Thunder Wyvern Beast blood technique. Just like the blood technique that Gray had cultivated before, the Thunder Wyvern Beast blood technique also had 4 training methods in one cycle. Each training method was divided into an external training method and an internal totem training method. Gray was currently cultivating the first training method. The external training method was secondary. The most difficult was the internal totem training method. The higher the level, the more complex the totem training method, and the more difficult it was to cultivate. The totem training method, after reaching the Desolate Grade, was several times more difficult than the Barbarian Grade. With no one to guide him, Gray could only fumble around on his own. As a result, Gray was still cultivating the first training method. Asterisk crackle. Asterisk in the empty space next to the tent. Gray maintained a strange training method. His legs were taut, and he was in a state where he could leap up at any time. His body was slightly bent, as if he was in a battle state. Inside his body, a complicated and cumbersome totem was being constructed from the power of blood. It was a blood beast that resembled a lizard but had a single, knife-like horn. Asterisk 1. Asterisk the moment this totem was completed, a strange vibration sounded in the air, and then a large amount of blue light quickly gathered. The blue light seemed to have a life of its own as it quickly gathered and solidified. Finally, a gigantic lizard with a single horn on its head appeared. The lizard was 9 meters long, and its entire body was covered in blue scales. It was as if there were pieces of sapphires embedded in its body. A terrifying aura suddenly appeared, and the various animals that were playing in the forest on both sides of the road all stopped playing. Some of them ran away in fear, while others were so scared that they prostrated themselves on the ground, not daring to move at all. I finally succeeded in cultivating the first training method. The purple lizard disappeared, and Gray withdrew from his training. After spending a week, Gray had finally succeeded in cultivating the first training method. The Wallen family has probably received news that I've entered the territory. Gray looked in one direction. It was the direction where the Wallen family was, and a cold smile appeared on his face. His strength had reached the barbarian level, and his combat strength was comparable to a barbarian blood warrior who had completed a round of training. He also had 4 barbarian-level blood beasts that could transform into metal and had a terrifying defense. With such combat strength, he could defeat any opponent in the barbarian level. Although he should be slightly weaker than a barbarian blood warrior, he definitely had the ability to resist. Even if the weapon that he suspected to be a forbidden weapon was not what he thought it was, he still had the ability to escape easily. Hence, even though he knew that he would be discovered by the Wallen family, he was not afraid. Moreover, based on his estimation, there was at least a 90% chance that the crossbow bolt was a forbidden weapon. After all, it was too similar to the Kenneth family's forbidden weapon. In the Wallen family's meeting room, a group of senior members of the family was gathered. Their faces were filled with anger. An old man in his 50s sat on the main seat. He had a brown beard and a dignified aura. Due to his anger, his dignified aura was even stronger. He was the head of the Wallen family, Brent Wallen. On his left, there was a handsome young man. He was Edgar Wallen, who had interacted with Gray many times. On his right, there was an old man covered in bandages. This person had also interacted with Gray many times. He was one of the 3 barbarian blood warriors of the Wallen family. He had also gone to the tomb of the king this time. However, he had been seriously injured when he was helping Master Herman to crack the rune mechanism, so he did not enter the tomb of the king. Head of the family, what did the royal family say? The old man covered in bandages asked. The royal family's attitude is very clear. They don't think that Gray Fergus is responsible for Uncle Ralph's death. Brent Wallen said in a deep voice, "Damn it, the royal family is obviously siding with Gray Fergus. I heard that the second princess has a close relationship with Gray Fergus. It seems that it is true. He has the royal family's protection. What should we do? Are we just going to let it go?" Some of the senior members of the Wallen family were furious, while others frowned. "We can't just let it go like this." Edgar clenched his fists, his eyes spitting fire. "Father, since the royal family doesn't intend to do anything, then let us do it ourselves. Let me command the rune puppets to attack the Fergus family." At this moment, a man dressed as a butler hurriedly ran in and spoke to the head of the Wallen family, Brent Wallen. "Head of the family, we've just received news that Gray Fergus has been found within Wallen territory. Looking at the direction he's heading, it seems that he's coming for the Wallen family." Hearing this news, the senior members of the Wallen family exploded. They were so angry that their eyes were spitting fire, and their faces were trembling violently. "What? He actually dares to come here? Arrogant, too arrogant. The Wallen family has been established for hundreds of years, and we have never suffered such humiliation. Kill him, we must kill him. No, we must capture him alive and peel off his flesh piece by piece. Let him die from the pain for 7 days and 7 nights. The head of the Wallen family, Brent Wallen, was also burning with rage. His voice seeped out from between his teeth as he spoke coldly. Gray Fergus. Chapter 365. The West Province City was the second largest city in the Wallen territory, second only to Wallen City. It had a population of over 1 million. On the way to the Wallen family, Gray entered the city and prepared to purchase some things. Many people have died in the appearance of the king's tomb. Which king's tomb doesn't have a group of people dying? But even if they know it's very dangerous, there are still people who can't help but try their luck. This time is no exception. I heard that 4 barbarian blood warriors died this time. I wonder if that's true? It's true. One of the barbarian blood warriors came from the Wallen family. I heard it from someone who went to the king's tomb. This information is definitely reliable. I heard that the Wallen family's barbarian blood warrior was assassinated. The entire Wallen family is furious. They actually dared to assassinate the Wallen family. Aren't they afraid of the Wallen family's revenge? A power that can enter the king's tomb is not simple. Although the Wallen family is powerful, it doesn't mean that no one dares to provoke them. At the very least, the families of the three dukes won't back down. After entering the city, Gray heard many discussions about the king's tomb. It was clear that the news had already reached here. Which family do you think will be the biggest winner this time? It should be the Addison family. The Purple Thunder King's silver-ranked magic weapon, the Purple Thunder Spear, has fallen into the hands of the Addison family. This time, the Addison family will definitely be the family with the biggest harvest. Silver-ranked magic weapon. That's a silver-ranked magic weapon that can allow you to fight above your level. Some people had envious expressions. It might not be the Addison family. The frost dagger obtained by the Kenneth family isn't simple either. I heard that it's also a silver-ranked magic weapon. You've forgotten about someone. That person obtained a book. I heard that it's very likely the blood law that the Purple Thunder King once cultivated. That kind of blood law book is enough to create a powerful family. Its value definitely won't be lower than a silver-ranked magic weapon. Is it that person called Gray Fergus? I heard that the barbarian blood warrior of the Wallen family was killed by him. That's the man. He's not from the 3rd Duke and 7th Marquis family. He actually dared to attack the Wallen family. He's got guts. You underestimate the other families too much. Although the 3rd Duke and 7th Marquis family is powerful, it doesn't mean that there are no other families that can contend with them. On the streets of West Continent City, most of the pedestrians were discussing the king's graveyard. The king's graveyard usually contained unimaginable wealth. Ordinary people were the most enthusiastic about such things. Get lost, get lost. On the street, a wave of arrogant shouts could be heard as a group of people rode over. The person in the lead was a young man of about 20 years old. The young man was dressed in high-end aristocratic attire and had an arrogant look on his face. He rode on a strong red horse and held a black whip in his hand. He drove the horse on a rampage on the streets, and anyone who blocked his way was sent flying by his whip. He was very heavy-handed, and those who were whipped immediately had bloody wounds appear on their bodies. However, they all gritted their teeth and endured it, not daring to speak out. They were very clear that if they were to confront him head-on, their end would be miserable. Get out of the way. That's young Master Marcus of the Wallen family. Many people saw this group of people charging over, especially the young man in the lead, and their expressions immediately changed, and they all dodged to the side of the street. Gray thought for a moment and also moved to the side of the street. Although he had indeed come to deal with the Wallen family, he had no interest in attacking a member of the Wallen family. However, it was clearly impossible for him to dodge to the side in panic. Not to mention a mere member of the Wallen family. Even if the head of the Wallen family was here, it would be impossible. Thus, he calmly walked to the side. However, this calmness was very dazzling to some people. At least, this member of the Wallen family called Marcus felt that Gray's calmness was extremely dazzling. Coupled with the oppressive atmosphere of the Wallen family in recent days, he couldn't help but feel a surge of hostility in his heart. Whoosh! With a cold snort, the horsewhip in his hand whistled through the air like a viper as it lashed out at Gray. Because he was dissatisfied, he had poured a lot of strength into this whip. With his strength as a ferocious warrior, the strength of this whip was enough to keep an ordinary person bedridden for several months. With his current hearing, Gray naturally heard the whistling sound behind him very clearly. He really couldn't be bothered to pay attention to a member of the Wallen family, but he hadn't expected that the other party wouldn't let him go. His eyes chilled as he turned around and grabbed the horsewhip with one hand. Then, with a pull, Marcus, who was sitting upright on the horse, was pulled down from the horse and fell to the ground. Although the other party had the strength of a ferocious warrior, this strength was clearly not enough in front of Gray. Before he could even react, Gray had already pulled him off his horse. He even landed face first on the ground, his face covered in dust. "Young Master Marcus, are you all right?" "Bastard, you actually dared to attack young Master Marcus. The entire Wallen territory won't tolerate you." The complexions of the guards following behind Marcus changed greatly. They jumped off their horses one after another, helped Marcus up, and glared at Gray with murderous looks on their faces. Some of them even pulled out their weapons, which flickered with cold light. "It's over. This guy is finished. This young man is too impulsive. He should have endured. Many people shook their heads, looking at Gray with eyes full of sympathy and regret. They all felt that Gray was too impulsive. If he could have endured, although he would have been whipped, this matter would have passed. Now that he had pulled young Master Marcus off his horse and caused him to suffer, it wasn't something that could be settled with a whip. If things went wrong, he might even lose his life. "You're courting death." Marcus got up from the ground and glared at Gray with a face full of anger as he coldly said. Because his face was on the ground, it was covered in dust. Many people in the surroundings couldn't help but laugh, but no one dared to laugh out loud. They could only hold it in, but their expressions were slightly strange. Facing the raging Marcus, Gray's expression was indifferent. He glanced at the other side and said, "Courting death? You're not worthy. Arrogant. Do you know who young Master Marcus is? Young Master Marcus is a direct descendant of the Wallen family. You've offended young Master Marcus. There's no place for you in the entire Wallen territory. If you know what's good for you, quickly kneel and beg for mercy." Several guards flew into a rage and angrily berated. One of them bowed and respectfully asked Marcus, "Young Master Marcus, do you want me to cripple him? Don't kill him yet. Leave him alive." Marcus ordered with a cold glint in his eyes. Hearing his order, the guard drew the saber at his waist and slowly walked towards Gray with a sinister smile, like a cat playing with a mouse. "This young man is finished. Even if he doesn't die, he'll probably be crippled. Not only will he suffer, but his family will also be implicated. This young man's clothes are of high quality. Maybe his background isn't simple? So what if it isn't simple? In the Wallen territory, can his background be stronger than the Wallen family?" The surrounding onlookers discussed in low voices, inwardly shaking their heads and exhorting the young people around them to not be like Gray, causing such a disaster in a moment of impulse. Among the onlookers, there was an ordinary-looking middle-aged man who looked no different from an ordinary person. But when he saw the conflict between Gray and Marcus, he had an anxious look on his face and paced back and forth anxiously. He was a member of the Wallen family and was sent by the Wallen family to monitor Gray. Naturally, he understood Gray very well. He was extremely powerful and had plotted the death of a brute blood warrior of the Wallen family. He was a formidable enemy of the Wallen family. Because of the other party's arrival, the entire Wallen family was on high alert. Now that he saw his family's young master clashing with the other party, he couldn't help but feel anxious. If he went out, the other party would probably immediately know that he was being monitored. But if he didn't go out, young Master Marcus would definitely suffer a great loss today. After hesitating for a while, he finally clenched his teeth and walked out. If he allowed young Master Marcus to clash with the other party and get seriously injured, the family would definitely not forgive him. "Who are you?" The middle-aged man's approach immediately attracted the attention of Marcus and several guards. "Young Master Marcus, I'm working for young Master Edgar. We've met before." "Oh, it's you." Marcus still had some impression of the middle-aged man and recognized him. The middle-aged man hurriedly approached and whispered in Marcus's ear. "What?" After a moment, Marcus's expression changed. Cold sweat even faintly slid down his forehead. He looked at Gray in horror and then hurriedly ordered the guard from before. "Come back quickly." After recalling the guard, Marcus didn't dare to say a single harsh word. He rode his horse far away from Gray and left with his tail between his legs. If someone paid attention, they would discover that his back was soaked in cold sweat. Young Master Marcus left just like that? This isn't young Master Marcus style. Who the hell is this person to actually be able to scare young Master Marcus away? The onlookers looked at each other in dismay. They originally thought that Gray would be miserable, but they didn't expect that young Master Marcus, who had been so aggressive just a moment ago, would flee in the blink of an eye without even daring to say a single harsh word. Obviously, this young man's identity wasn't simple. At the very least, he came from a big family not inferior to the Wallen family. Otherwise, it would be impossible for him to intimidate young Master Marcus, to the point that young Master Marcus didn't even dare to say a single harsh word. Seeing Marcus' group leave, Gray could naturally guess what had happened, but he had no intention of stopping them from leaving. At his current level of strength, he naturally wouldn't make things difficult for a mere child of a hostile family. Of course, the premise was that the other party didn't take the initiative to provoke him. Since the other party took the initiative to retreat, he didn't bother to pay attention to them. After purchasing the necessary supplies in West Province City and staying for a night, Gray left West Province City the next day. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. On the road to the Wallen family, suddenly, a large number of plants on the side of the road grew frantically. Each one was as thick as a bucket and had extremely sharp tips. They blotted out the sky and covered the earth, falling from the sky and attacking Gray. Chapter 366. Finally ready to make a move? Looking at the thick vines covering the sky, Gray sneered. He had been monitored by the Wallen family for a long time, and he had naturally sensed it long ago, but he had ignored it. After all, he had never thought of hiding his whereabouts. Now that the Wallen family had finally made a move against him, it was obvious that they were fully prepared and felt that they could deal with him, or rather, kill him. Hula, facing the vines that blotted out the sky and covered the earth, Gray stood where he was without moving. However, a green river appeared around him. The green river circled around Gray like a natural barrier, protecting Gray. In the river, white cold air filled the air, and green wind blades floated up and down. They had both the freezing ability of ice and the sharpness of wind blades. The two abilities mixed together and rushed toward the numerous vines that covered the sky and covered the earth. Ka ka ka. The first thing that came into contact with the attacking vines was the cold air in the green river. The terrifying cold air had the freezing power to destroy everything. As soon as it came into contact, or even just getting close, the vines were already frozen by the cold air, turning into clusters of beautiful ice sculptures. Pu. Then, a large number of wind blades appeared. Like sharp long knives, they slashed through the frozen vines and easily cut them into countless pieces. Looking down from above, countless vines were baring their fangs and brandishing their claws, trying to attack Gray, but when they were dozens of meters away from Gray, they were turned into ice sculptures by the white cold air. Their vitality was extinguished, and they were finally cut into a pile of ice shards. What? The Wallen family doesn't even dare to show their faces. All the attacking vines were frozen and cut into pieces, and a pile of ice shards flowed on the ground. Gray looked at the left and right sides of the road. There was a dense forest there, with dense branches and leaves, and nothing could be seen except for the trees. However, with his infrared perception, Gray could sense that there were people there. Gray Fergus, how dare you? You killed a barbarian blood warrior of my Wallen family, and you dare to appear in my Wallen family's territory. In one of the places, the branches blocking the way seemed to have a life of their own, automatically parting to reveal an old man of about 50 years old. The old man was wearing a purple high-grade battle armor, and his figure was tall, but his eyes were filled with a bone-chilling hatred. He was the current head of the Wallen family, Brent Wallen. A barbarian blood warrior had died because of Gray. Not only that, Gray dared to appear in Wallen territory, so one could imagine his hatred. A barbarian blood warrior who killed your Wallen family? I can't admit to that. Gray looked at the head of the Wallen family, Brent Wallen, and smiled. The king's tomb is full of traps. Since you dared to enter, you must be prepared to die. The barbarian blood warrior of your Wallen family clearly died under the king's tomb's rune mechanism. It has nothing to do with me. Although the barbarian blood warrior of the Wallen family did die because of Gray, Gray would never admit that he killed him. If he admitted it, even if the royal family didn't want to do anything to him because of the second princess, they would have no choice but to do so. Sophistry. If it weren't for your coercion, how could Relf die under the rune mechanism? In another direction, an old man covered in bandages gnashed his teeth. After knowing that Gray was coming, although his injuries hadn't healed, he still gritted his teeth and continued to participate in the battle. He wouldn't be satisfied if he couldn't see this great enemy die with his own eyes. Uncle, don't waste words with him. He will definitely die today. The head of the Wallen family, Brent Wallen, coldly snorted and ordered, "Attack together. Don't give him a chance to use spatial teleportation." Shio. A large number of trees and oddly shaped plants grew rapidly and surrounded Gray. Some grew extremely thick vines that were like the tail of a huge python and lashed out at Gray. A fruit sprouted from the fruit, and a seed with a sharp edge that was even sturdier than metal shot out towards Gray. Some bloomed flowers that emitted a fragrance that was poisonous. In order to deal with Gray, the Wallen family had sent out all their elites. Apart from the head of the Wallen family, Brent Wallen, and the 2 barbarian blood warriors, there were also several berserk blood warriors participating in the attack. In response, Gray only smiled coldly. Hula! A green river appeared around him, and a large amount of cold air and wind blades merged together and swept out like a raging tide. All the vines and seeds that were like hidden weapons were frozen in the first moment, and then immediately shattered by the wind blades. Not a single vine or seed was able to get close to Gray. This wasn't the end. After destroying the vines and seeds that were like hidden weapons, the green river continued to spread in all directions. Further away, the plants that were emitting a strange fragrance were also frozen. Even the fragrance was blown away, preventing it from reaching Gray. A large number of wind blades sliced through, and these plants were all shattered. Pu. Several blood warriors of the Wallen family who were hiding behind trees were attacked by the cold air and turned into ice sculptures. Then, they were slashed by the wind blades that appeared later on, and their bodies were covered in wounds as they were sent flying. The power of the combination of cold ice and wind blades was comparable to the blood beast ability of a barbarian blood warrior who had completed a round of training. Under Gray's full power, it exploded with a terrifying power that far surpassed that of an ordinary barbarian. Even if 2 barbarian blood warriors and several berserk blood warriors worked together, it would still be difficult for them to contend against him. It's as described in the news. The power of his mixed blood beast ability indeed surpasses that of an ordinary barbarian. Only the head of the Wallen family, Brent Wallen, and the bandaged old man managed to dodge the attack of the Green River by relying on the strength of a barbarian blood warrior. The 2 of them looked at Gray with a grave expression, and their eyes were filled with wariness. He's really lucky to have obtained a mixed blood beast ability that surpasses that of an ordinary barbarian blood warrior. The berserk blood warrior was filled with wariness and jealousy at the same time. He was already so old, but he was still unable to reach the 2nd level of the barbarian realm, which was the level where one completed a round of training. However, the other party was only in his 20s and had already reached that level. This made him extremely jealous and, at the same time, extremely fearful. He had to take advantage of this opportunity to kill him here. Although he did not think that it was possible for the other party to become a king warrior, with his age, it was completely possible for him to become a desolate blood warrior. When he grew up, it would be an unimaginable disaster for the Wallen family. So what if he has power that surpasses that of an ordinary barbarian? The main force this time is not us. Those who make an enemy of the Wallen family will not have a good ending. The head of the Wallen family, Brent Wallen, sneered as he looked in a certain direction. There, a gigantic figure that was more than 10 meters tall stood up. Its height was even higher than the surrounding trees. Boom! The gigantic figure leapt, crossing a distance of more than 10 meters. After a series of earth tremors, it appeared extremely close to Gray. A huge metal palm descended from the sky, bringing with it a commotion similar to that of a meteor crashing down from the heavens. It slammed down towards Gray. This was the main force of the Wallen family in this battle, a rune puppet whose power was comparable to that of a desolate blood warrior. With this rune puppet, he believed that he would be able to eliminate this future threat. Whoosh! The gigantic palm covered the sky as it slammed down, forming a shadow. Gray's expression changed, and he quickly retreated. Rumble! The ground shook violently, and a deep hole with a diameter of more than 10 meters appeared on the ground. The deep hole was several meters deep and had an irregular shape. One could vaguely tell that it was a palm print. Some of the rocks that were struck by it were all reduced to powder. With the deep hole as the center, more than 10 cracks large enough for an adult to fall and spread out, extending for more than 10 meters. It was a terrifying attack. It did not have the ability of a blood beast, and was only the most ordinary and pure power. But the destructive power it displayed was indescribably terrifying and was not inferior to any blood beast ability. What a terrifying, destructive power! Gray hurriedly retreated, his face full of solemnity. Even if it was the most ordinary power, when it reached a certain level, it could display an unimaginable destructive power, just like what was happening now. Fortunately, he had long been on guard against this rune puppet of the Wallen family. It was because of this that he was able to dodge in time when the rune puppet appeared. But even so, he was so shocked that he broke out in a cold sweat. With such a degree of destructive power, even if he could transform his body into metal and had one of the strongest barbarian-level defenses, if he was struck by it, he would definitely be seriously injured. He actually dodged it. But since the rune puppet has already closed in on him, being killed is only a matter of time. The head of the Wallen family, Brent Wallen, coldly laughed. He had full confidence in this rune puppet of his family, which was the ultimate trump card of his family. It had the battle power of a desolate blood warrior and was definitely not something that a barbarian blood warrior could contend against. Even if the opponent had a powerful magic weapon in his hands, and the ability of a blood beast was comparable to a barbarian blood warrior who had completed a round of training. The difference of a large realm was not something that could be made up for in such a way. If the opponent had a silver-ranked magic weapon, then it was possible. But according to reliable information, he was very sure that the two silver-ranked magic weapons that had appeared in the Tomb of the King had not fallen into the hands of the opponent. The rune puppet was more than 10 meters tall, and its entire body flickered with a metallic luster. Its head did not have two eyes like a human's, but a vertical eye in the middle of its head. The huge vertical eye was golden in color, and rune patterns were densely packed within. It was filled with a mysterious feeling, as if it was the eye of a god. Although its body was huge, its movements were extremely nimble. After missing its attack, the rune puppet quickly stood up, and with a sweep of its huge rune eye, it had already discovered Gray. It took a step forward and chased after Gray. In just 3 steps, it was already in front of Gray. Its huge palm covered the sky and was about to strike down again.